Hey folks, it's Bear Gardner, and we are back with yet more of the Homefront card reveals. As it turns out, the last video we did manage to keep to a reasonable length of time, but it was also quite hard work, so we've decided to recruit some extra help. This time round, you're going to get 3 of us talking, but I'm going to do my very best as a referee to make sure we keep this video at a reasonable length, and we've only got 23 cards, so find yourself a cup of cocoa, chill out, and we'll do our best to entertain you whilst at the same time not taking 4.5 hours. Joining me in the impossible quest, I have 2 of my closest friends in the game. Directly down below me is the inimitable JKing7, who is joining us. JKing, why don't you let people know who you are if for some bizarre reason they don't?
Howdy folks, I'm JKing7. I have a YouTube channel, I have a Twitch channel that I rarely use, and I primarily focus on the competitive aspect of the game, but I also cover all balance patches, new expansions, and all other sorts of updates surrounding the game, and I'm sure my presence will not have any impact on the runtime for this video.
Can confirm absolutely zero. And joining him in solely and entirely leaving the responsibility to me is Core. How you doing, Core? Why don't you let people know who you are?
Hey guys, how's it going? CoreData here, and yeah, I am also a small-time cards content creator. I usually post videos on YouTube on Saturdays, albeit not for the last 2 weeks because I've been far too busy, and I also occasionally stream over on Twitch, and I spend most of my time complaining about Crossfire.
That's fair. To be fair, you still have some work to do to beat my current, I think, standing record with regards to number of recorded complaints about Retribution. But keep going, we're sure you'll get there. Right, so we've had another 23 cards drop. I'm not doing these in any kind of special order, and that is nothing to you, dear viewer, except for the fact that, as you can probably tell from the fact that behind me is a blank wall, my house is an absolute demolition job right now. There's a lot of stuff going on with electrical works and other things, which means I have a limited amount of time in which to make these videos, which is why I am deeply grateful for these guys for cutting time in their schedule to suit my somewhat less ideal schedule. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we cover everything before release, but I am going to say this might be the one time I fail, but I will try. So, we've had 23 new cards, and we're going to do them in the order that they were released on the Cards main Discord. Which means that this isn't by any specific nation. So if you want to hop to a specific nation or specific cards, check the timestamps, click to wherever you want to go, save yourself the whole length of the video, although I think it's worth it. We're marginally entertaining, judging by our viewer numbers. Right, so join me, my friends, as we introduce ourselves to the 43rd Infantry Regiment from Germany. So this is a new German standard infantry. It is a 4-cost 4/5, 1-op cost, and it has Bond. Not massively surprising, given the stats. It also has, at the end of your turn, draw the top card of your deck if it has an even cost. Right, before I let the others chat, clarity, because we seem to get this on virtually every card that releases. It really is as simple as it sounds. If this is on the board, it will check your deck. If the top card of your deck has an even cost, this will draw it. If there are 2 of these on the board, then the next one will check. If the second from top card on your deck, you get the idea, right? It's pretty simple on principle. Is it any good? Well, I guess that's what you tuned in for us to tell you. So, I don't know, let's start at the bottom because I like being contrary. Core, what do you make of the 43rd Infantry Regiment?
I mean, if nothing else is interesting, and also I do want to apologize. If any of the viewers are wondering why I keep looking around and why I'm like laughing so much, my cat is currently on a... She's got the zoomies right now, so you might see her darting around in the background, so I do apologize. But the 43rd Infantry Regiment is, like I said, if nothing else, a very interesting card. It's interesting to see like the the odd-based archetype kind of expanding, because we had Jet Prototype being like the only thing that cared about odd or even cards. This is a mechanic that was explored like very, very much in Hearthstone through like Gen and Baku in Witchwood, and it was flirted with in Eternal a little bit with like even-handed Golem. So it's interesting to see cards like have a crack at it, but as far as the card itself goes, it's like not bad. 4-cost 1-up 4/5 is already like on rate, and the fact that if you build your deck correctly, this just draws you a card every turn. I can't really call it bad because it's guaranteed to draw you a card regardless. Like if you're only playing even costs, so it's just a question of will you have enough even cost cards. Now I do believe that 0-cost cards also count as even, if I'm not mistaken. At least that's how every other card game I've played treats 0 costs. So I'm assuming 0 costs will count as even.
Trust the two veterans of the Jet Prototype meta, although one of us did take a holiday and not endure it the way I did. Yes, 0-cost cards count as even. Anyway, carry on.
Just something to bear in mind, depending on like what way you want to build this deck, that you can include 0 costs. It might be relevant. You never know. But yeah, it's an interesting card. It's not gonna be particularly played in the metagame, I don't think. But I'm certain people are going to experiment this. I'm certainly going to experiment this.
Yeah, I if nothing else, I did create a really interesting meme card that's knocking around the Discord with a German quote that translates as "Please no, not the jet again." Anyway, so JKing, what do you make of our new German infantry?
I mainly wish that this card didn't have Bond on it, because I think it would be obviously it would be better if it didn't have Bond. Bond is almost exclusively a negative keyword to have on a card. But this card would be much more playable. Like it would go from like kind of a meme card to like actually a card worth considering if it didn't say Bond on it. Because what I love about this over Jet, because Jet was an introduction in cards to the even odd thing, and then they dropped it like a hot potato, and I've been asking ever since that they add more cards to do odd and even, because if you're going to have one, you might as well have a few. This is the next card we get in that direction, but unlike Jet, you don't need a deck of 40 even cards to play this card. Like, in Jet, especially with the change to be op cost, you can't play it in a deck with any number of odd cards, because you always risk the chance of hitting a single odd card, and then your Jet has 1 operation instead of 0 operation, and then it completely throws off your curve, and you can't attack with it, and then you miss 5 damage, and then you lose the game. Whereas this, if you played in a deck with 75% even, I mean, is a 4 credit 4/5 at the end of your turn, draw card 75% of the time good? Yeah, it's pretty good. You play this in a deck with 50% even, so like not a deck that's trying to be even or odd, just a normal deck that you kind of ignore this. Is drawing a card 50% of the time at the end of your turn good? Well, it's certainly not bad. And then that's kind of the issue where Bond comes in, where it's like, well, if you also have to take a damage for a 50% chance to draw a card at the end of your turn, then it starts to get a little sketchier. And also, it supports an archetype that's somewhere between Heinz and German control, and that's just not really something that Germany has been doing recently. And then obviously you could just throw it in with a regular Jet deck, but I'm not convinced that Jet would necessarily need this.
Yeah, so I guess I'll give my own thoughts, although many of them I think have already been expressed. Despite my somewhat sarcastic calling out of the clearly accurate application of the Bond keyword to this card, I share my co-presenter's question as to why? Why does this need Bond? There are things I like about this card. I like the fact that, like JKing, this is pointing in the direction of what I think is an interesting direction of play. I love the fact that, in theory, this would be really quite good in a 4-attack deck if you had a lot of even cost 4-attack cards that this could do something cool with. I quite like the fact that this would enable Jet as a card that you would run in a deck that wasn't just how fast can I get my Jet in your face. Someone's going to meme that. That was a badly chosen sentence. But anyway, the problem is Bond is so... I honestly think Bond is going to hold this back because it has the potential, especially if we see, like in the coming cards, some more support for something similar. It could be really cool, but why did we slap Bond on it? It's a shame, but I do think it's interesting, and I do kind of hope that it does mean that we're gonna like look at Odd and maybe even two, please, and just see if that's something that we can mess around with. I mean, we already seem to be saying, hey, we've got Bond, so we can consider mono decks. So why not play with odds and evens? It can be fun.
I mean, I wonder if there's ever a world that you just slot this into like a weird version of Germany US, because you're playing War Machine on 2 regardless, right? So you can play this on 3, and then you've got a 4/5 that draws you a card. Yeah, you take 1 damage, but like,
I mean,
you also just have a draw. You just have a draw engine online. I mean, you're not really playing that many 3-drops in that deck anyway, outside of maybe Seahawk, but I don't think Seahawk is even correct anymore after the nerf. So like maybe it makes its way into like a weird version of Germany US. There's a chance. It's like JKing said, it's not a bad card. If this draws you a card like 75% of the time, you're more than happy to play that. I do think the Bond is like ill justified. I think if it had Blitz, then the Bond would make more sense.
Yeah.
But as is, I don't think it needs Bond.
or I don't know, shock, anything, any other interesting keyword would make this kind of rate Bond, I think.
I don't know if I'd go as far as to say that we need more Blitz or shock units.
No, I agree, but I'm
I think we're both just trying to make the case that this would need something else to justify.
Maybe ambush. That's a keyword we don't get a lot.
I mean, although we are starting to get some more now, aren't we? And given some of the stuff that we might see more ambush just appearing. What I will say, though, is and it's sort of foreshadowing some stuff in the future, and I thought I had. This, combined with some of the lesser used German credit acceleration cards, by which I mean the 2-drop that gives you a production, and also the Blitz Panzergrenadier that veterans and gives you an extra credit slot, plus a bit of US ramp, could in theory open up the potential to try hyper ramping if you could figure out something it was worth hyper ramping to, if you don't mind eating the burn. But we'll come to that sort of thing sort of later. Call it foreshadowing or just me being a teasing arsehole. We'll hop on, I think, to the next card. I think we could probably talk about this for a while longer, but we'll save you from that because we're just going to go down Archetype Alley. Our next card is British, and this is the London Irish Rifles. So this is a British limited infantry. It is a 2-cost, 1-op cost, 2/4. And it says, when you play a card with Bond, deal 1 damage to the enemy HQ. Right, before everyone loses themselves off the tree, because I know there are people out there who lived through Commandos who are going to be heading in a specific direction. What I do want to say, before we completely lose our collective minds over this possibility of ping damaging cards, it sounds great doing ping damage every time you play something, but what made Commandos great, and for the guys, I am air quoting on the screen, was the fact that there was a point at which you could hyper accelerate into infinite cycling of orders and all sorts of other things, and I have seen absolutely no sign so far that Bond is going to be super inexpensive enough that you're going to go, turn 8, 17 Bond cards. What I do think this does do, though, is this does, for me, make it interesting to see if we're going to see more kind of defensive ping-style Britain decks. We've seen attempts at this before with, like, Garrison and with Commandos, just smoke screen and doing some ping when you play orders to try and build something else, although then it turned into just a machine gun. Which, by the way, I know you're out there. I know someone is going to try and turn this into a machine gun. Go for your life. But I don't think that's the intent here. But I will say, I think it's interesting. I'm not convinced it's good. JKing, London Irish Rifles.
I The most interesting thing to say about this card, in my opinion, is the fact that we have fully left the realm where a 2-credit 2/4 with upside is a like outlier. This just seems to be the new norm for the stats of a 2-cost infantry, which I'm not a huge fan of. But that's where we are. In terms of the actual effect on London Irish rifles, I think this supports the best honest attempt they have had at giving Britain a ground unit-based aggro deck. I think it's still terrible. I'm just not convinced that there's a world where dealing 1 damage with this guy when you play a bond unit matters that much. I feel like if you're playing a lot of these cheap British bond units that we've seen, it's in a deck that is going to try to win off of early board advantage, not off of getting like 2 or 3 extra pings. You'd probably still play London Irish rifles in that deck just because it's a 2-credit 2/4. So it's a British unit that you can play early, that it's difficult to remove, that it will stop bond damage, and like even if it does like 2 damage, you're fine with it. I just don't think that deck's going to be good because historically speaking, Britain does not do aggro unless it's with air units.
It's true. Core, where do you land?
Yeah, pretty much in full agreement with JKing. The only like redeeming thing about this is the stat line. 2/4 seems to be the new stat line that they're sticking on things that they want you to like that represent the cornerstone of like their early game decks. Like the new 2/4, the Magnificent Seventh and whatever. Like these are, I think they're all cards that they, like 99 are trying to push people into playing with by giving them the 2/4 stat line. The burn side of this doesn't really make much sense to me. This is like I said it before in Discord, and I'll say it again. It's like 1939 has like this mandate that they have to give Britain just a random burn card every set. So yeah, I mean it's fine. If you're playing it, you're playing it for the 2/4 body, not necessarily for the bond effect. It's more or less because this sticks on the board and enables the rest of your bond cards. And that's kind of the big upside for this. I mean, there's a world where like the bond aggro deck manifests and this becomes like a 2 of in the deck potentially. Like we're gonna be talking a lot more about the Brit bond stuff soon because some of it is very, very powerful. But I don't think this makes the cut anywhere like at all.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern, because I still have some optimism for seeing a decent, at least tier 2-ish Brit ground-based unit, because I am the eternal optimist, and I've been crying out for this ever since I joined the game. But yeah, I think this is one of those things. I don't know whether everyone builds decks physically the same way I do, but I usually end up in a game where I have like a 30, no, it's 39 in this game, but it could be 40. But if I've got a 40 card deck, I usually end up with like 50 some odd cards when I first build a deck, and then it's just cutting time. And I have a feeling in this deck, this is one of the first cards that gets pitched to make space for better things. Because I'd probably rather enable my bond on 2-drop with a honey than with this. But I'm reaching into the realms of deck crafting, and we're not there yet because we haven't seen all the cards. All right, granted, 2 of us technically have, but we're talking to you as though we haven't. We're not going to go down that route. But yeah, I think the problem is it just doesn't like. I do agree with you both. The 2/4 stat line seems to be we want this to be a card that you can play that somehow anchors something. And if we give it 2/4, it's just awkward enough to remove. Although, rush anyone, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's interesting. Right, we're back to Germany now, because all of this was posted in some random orders, and we have arrived at a new Dornier. This is the Dornier DO17Z. This is a 3-cost, 2-op cost, 2/4 bomber. It is a special card, and it says, once per turn, gain 2 credits and draw a card when an undestroyed unit leaves the battlefield. Okay, clarification bear time before I let the boys talk. Undestroyed unit, and I got asked this on Discord a couple of times recently. If it does this, that, blah, this, the other. Undestroyed means exactly what it says. A unit leaves the board without being destroyed. It's really that simple. Whether it's bounced back to hand, returned to hand, shuffled back into your deck, just removed using just remove, as Core and I talked about in the last video, being quite a powerful form of methodology, or we print a card that says take card, twiddle 7 times and tuck under the sofa next door, that they all still do the same thing. They would all trigger this because they have been removed, like they have left the battlefield, without being destroyed. Doesn't mean they can't come back, doesn't mean anything else, it just means they leave the battlefield and then you get to gain 2 credits and draw a card once per turn. I'm going to leave my thoughts to the end, and we're just going to keep swapping this up, so we'll start with Core this time. Welcome to the Dornier, Core. What do you make of it?
It's a really interesting card. So first of all, it's a 3-cost 2-up 2/4, so it's Coronado stats. And my experience with playing quite a bit of boosters, like specifically like US Finland, is that 3-cost 2 for bomber is like not the easiest thing in the world to remove. For a lot of decks, it's very awkward to get to in the backline if you've got anything at all going on. And this does its text. This effect is incredibly powerful. I just don't know because I haven't seen the full package that's like meant to support this just yet. So I don't know if there's any big payoff, because this ideally supports 2 things. This supports the Germany self-bounce stuff, and it supports the Japanese banish playstyle with like the Peggy and stuff. So it really depends on what else is like around it, because if you're playing like Japan main, Germany ally, this plus isolation is very, very powerful. So it really depends on like the rest of the package surrounding it. If the Germany self-bounce stuff is good, then the Dornier is going to be good. If the Japanese removal stuff is good, then Dornier, it might just see play in like Japan Germany control. So yeah, super interesting effect. Gives you a ton of credit advantage. Gives you card advantage in a way that Germany likes to get card advantages, similarly to like how Bergman works with converts. So it's card advantage that we're like familiar with seeing how they function, and it's on a relatively difficult to interact with body for the most part. Obviously, there's things that do just instantly kill this tactical strike, raiding brigade, whatnot. But it is, like I said, it's an awkward stat line for a lot of decks to deal with. So yeah, I'm interested in this card. I think it's going to be like powerful, dependent on what its respective packages look like.
Seems fair, JK?
I think that this card would be much better served if it was a fighter rather than a bomber. Because the issue I see with this card is, I think you want to play this in a deck that is just running a decent amount of retreat, or a decent amount of the Japan remove stuff. I'm still thoroughly unconvinced by the self-retreat stuff. I think it is hot garbage.
Yeah.
And I genuinely don't understand how popular the reaction has been to that archetype. Like, everyone just seems to forget that you have to respend the credits to replay the unit that you have added to your hand, and that is credits not spent doing anything else, while also removing a unit from your own board. It's just a huge tempo loss, and that 2 credits is not enough to make up for that. So I think you want to play this in a deck with retreat stuff, but if you're playing it with a deck with retreat stuff, you want to retreat things in the support line so they go to hand, so they leave the battlefield, so you trigger this. However, it's a bomber, so it's very vulnerable to things in the front line. And yeah, it just has like a little bit of anti-synergy there. And it's a little clunky to use, I feel like. My best thought would be you run this in like a Navy burn deck with U16 as a Navy card that retreats, and maybe you can like fit in a couple of the Japan remove units or remove unit orders with your ally nation side. But yeah, I'm not super convinced by this card, and I'm still very thoroughly unconvinced by the whole self-retreat package.
I do have one question, actually, in regards to the timing on this card. Because it's a when, it's not an after. Does that mean that if you cast, say, for example, Distant Front on this, will it still trigger? Because it's a when.
Yes, I believe it still will, because Distant Front will trigger on it before it leaves, but don't quote me on that. I cannot remember, but I think... Again, 1939, timing chart, when?
Yeah.
Somehow
it's written, it should.
I had that same thought, and I've not tested this, so again, I'm not speaking out of authority here, but I would assume it wouldn't, because the trigger is this unit fully leaving, like, because it's when it leaves the battlefield.
Yeah, this is one of
which
those.
I would assume necessitates this unit no longer being on the battlefield for it to trigger, but then it can't trigger because it's not on the battlefield.
Welcome, by the way,
it's-
to 66.6% of this conversation now really, really resisting the urge to reach for their access to the test server to find out the answer to the question. Because I don't know. It's an interesting thought. It really is actually quite. But
you guys can test it out and leave it in the comments.
Because yeah,
if it works or not.
If it does work, you could run it as just like a draw engine in a deck with 4 distant front and isolation, and then Dorniers, and you just exclusively get rid of your Dornier every turn to draw a card and gain a credit.
I mean, part of me sort of hopes I'm wrong in parsing it, and that JKing's right, because that would be bonkers. But on the subject of kind of bonkers, and I really am on bonkers here, I don't know whether it's just me, but has anybody else noticed that in response to this specific package and a couple of US cards, there's been this sudden appearance in the game of near infinite credits out of nowhere and opponents who don't do anything? Because I wish I had these opponents that seem to exist for all of these people who are responding. And if you're out there, I do understand that you're passionate, but every time I look at these comments about how broken some of these cards are, I'm like, you are completely correct. If you have 27 credit slots a turn and your opponent does nothing, yes, they're broken. But then so is a 0-op cost 1/1 with Blitz, because your opponent's not doing anything and you have infinite credits. But
yes, given infinite time and resources, this will win the game. Correct.
It's an accurate statement. But no, in all seriousness, and I will attempt not to be too sarcastic, it's just been a long day answering comments. Many of you will have seen me do so. I want this to be good, but I wish it was, like JKing says, I wish it was a fighter or an infantry or anything that isn't just so unbelievably vulnerable when it's doing its job. It's like, if this is doing its job, it becomes infinitely easier to get rid of, which feels really awkward to me. I don't know, but I do think it is, in fairness, we haven't seen the whole package yet. Maybe there's some cracked something or other that interacts with when you send things back to... I don't know, maybe we're going to print a card that says, like, German 116 elite guard that says, when unit leaves battlefield, reduce cost to 0. No, stop it, all of you. Just stop. If you can't get the sarcasm, you're in the wrong video. But hopping along
Second question.
Oh, God.
If I rapid engagement this or night attack this, when it rapid engagement comes back, I can trigger it a second time, correct?
Yes.
That one was easier.
If I just wanted to make sure it wasn't like a hard once per turn, like the Dornier will only, like, you know, the way like Chiro and stuff, like, only stacks once per turn. So if the when trigger works how I hope it does, how it's written, that means technically you can rapid engagement, get back 2 credits, draw a card, this comes back, you can then distant front this, potentially gain 2 credits, draw another card. So a lot of this is predicated on how 1939 think when should happen, because every other card game I have played, this should resolve while leaving the battlefield. So it should trigger on itself leaving.
Right, so one thing I quickly want to do is as of this comment, it's roughly 17:55 UK time. I say this is relevant because if on the 21st of the month at that time you felt the earth move, that is the sound of Kelly reaching for the keyboard to make sure that's not the case. No, I don't know, but you are correct, Core. In every other game that I have ever done that has a timing chart, yes, that would trigger in the correct sequence, but I have the funniest feeling it probably doesn't.
If it doesn't, it should be after, not when.
Yeah.
I see people asking for a timing chart in Cards all the time, and the issue I have with that request is it's predicated on the idea that Cards timings all work the same.
I was going to say, 1939 have no idea what way the timings work. It's all vibes.
I was going to say, in a conversation that I have had in which I was asked about this, and I'm not violating my NDA by saying this, about the request for a timing chart, I did clarify that implicit in my request for a timing chart is timings. Actual ones that follow consistency, like the stack in Magic the Gathering, or the resolution sequence in Vampire the Eternal Struggle, or whatever the hell they call it in Yu-Gi-Oh! Probably something weird with Dragon Ball at the end of it.
No, it's the chain. It's just the chain.
That's really... That disappoints me. But, yeah, you are correct. It would predicate actually having to go back and actually make everything work consistently. But let's be honest, would that be such a bad thing?
Yeah, I'm unconvinced 1939 will ever give up their current position of being able to use quote-unquote bug fixes to way card sequences work as a form of balance. Because if you create like a timing chart with everything with consistent timing, then you can no longer like just simply change certain sequences to balance the game. You actually have to like get into the nitty-gritty and change card text and stuff.
I'm stopping myself because I'm about to launch into a whole other video and a conversation, and I might do this. I might actually do a video about the basics of card and game design and some of the issues I have. But you guys don't want to hear that when we're supposed to reviewing cards. So let's move to Japan and review a card. Thank you for bearing with us. And we arrive at the 211th Tokyo. This is a special Japanese infantry. It is 2 cost. It is 0 op cost. It is a 4-2 infantry, and it has Blitz and Bond. I don't have any coverage to go, so JKing, go!
Well, we went 2 months with Japan not having an auto-include aggro special card. And yeah, all of the Japanese players were in withdrawal, and now they have another auto-include special to put back in their Jaggro decks. This is just 2 cavalry stapled together with Bond, but the Bond doesn't really matter because you're playing it in a Jaggro deck, so your health total doesn't matter a lot, and also you're probably running like 15 1-drops, so there's a fairly reasonable chance that this isn't even triggering the Bond on turn 2. And yeah, you just throw this up, and you know, maybe it gets traded by a Colm or a Cavalry or a 35T or any other number of things, and if that happens, it traded 1-for-1 with your 2-drop, and you're probably went credits even on that, and that's still absolutely fine. And if they can't trade into it immediately, it either gets to trade up incredibly well or hit face incredibly hard. And that's what you're looking for in an aggro card. Like, I know some people might look at the 2 health and be like, but it's so easy to remove. But there's, like, basically no downside to play this card in your deck. And if they remove it, that's perfectly fine. Yeah, this card is just nuts, and it goes into every single aggro Japan deck.
I will say it's the people who were jonesing for more aggro tools. This is by far the most straight up have a Japan aggro tool card we have seen yet. Yes, even beyond the one that everybody else went crazy about because it does a point of ping damage when it comes onto the board and recurs itself. This is amazing. Core, do you have any reason to dissent on our opinion?
No, not really. It's just a very, very good aggro unit. Yeah, there's like not really much to say. No notes.
I almost wish there was a rarity swap with this and the, I think it was the 106, the 1-cost ping guy that was revealed earlier. I'm not positive that this card should be a standard, but I am positive that the ping guy should not be a standard. So I don't know.
I'm 100% sold on that trade. That
it's
thing
funny
as
you
a
say
standard is interesting.
It's funny you say that because like I haven't played with it, so I don't have nearly as much information on it as you guys do. But to me, the 106 looks like maybe like a 2 over a 3 of at most in a Japan deck, because it's so difficult to make space in Japan aggro, and I don't know if it's better than like most of the other Blitz infantry and stuff. So it's a card that I don't think I'll be running more than like 2 or 3 of at a push.
I think it could very easily replace Type 94, depending on what the meta is looking like. Because I've never been a fan of running extra, like, Q-Fu to get extra surprise attacks type of stuff. So if you're running Type 94, you're running it for you hit 2 of them, and then you get to remove 1 big thing. But you're willing to play a 1-drop that can remove something early if you're in a slightly more aggressive meta, because that 1 ping damage, especially if you're in any type of mirror, is going to be much more relevant.
Yeah.
And then having the 1-3-0 op is incredible. If the card had 1 op, I would not run more than like 2 of it. But it has 0 op, so there's like actually like you could just play it on 1 with no downside.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a tremendous kind of bond enabler if we see any more bond aggro cards. And I will say I'm kind of with JKing on, because I've seen some weird builds at the minute where people are running like 4 copies of IGM Makura plus the Type 94s to try and just create removal. You can still get pretty good early removal with just 2 of the 106th pinging 2 health off something, which will remove or at least open up to remove a lot of the things that you want to have go. But anyway, we're back. We're doing it again where we leap into deck building. I'll do my best, folks, but I did warn you at the outset there are 3 of us. But yeah, no real notes beyond this is a tremendously good aggro tool, and if you're an aggro lover, celebrate. Over to the Soviet Union, which has occasionally found its way in some aggro lands recently, we arrive at the 44th Silesia. This is a 3-cost, 1-op cost special infantry. It is 3/3, and it has ambush, blitz, and deployment. Draw a card for each friendly unit with 2 or more combat keywords. I have a lot to say, but I'm going to start at the bottom because I think that's going to help everyone else's sanity. Core, how do you feel about this card?
The initial reaction to this card was so funny because everyone was like, "Oh my god, this thing is so crazy! A 3-cost 1-up 3/3 with ambush and blitz. That's crazy. They've never printed anything this powerful." Despite the fact they printed 6 motors literally last set. So like, it's a stat line that's already existed. It's a set of effects that's already existed. The only difference is that motors, like, guarantees always draws you a card at the cost of converting 2 random cards. This entirely depends on. Like, this also draws you a card because I think it counts itself if I'm not mistaken. It's not other friendly.
It does.
Yeah. So this draws you at least a card, but like, you're not guaranteed more than that. I don't know. It's the card draw effect in this is very powerful. This is going to guarantee draw 1 card, most likely going to draw you 2. That's good. I don't think it's broken. I think it's a perfectly fine, reasonable-ish card that pushes the Soviet keyword soup deck, which is I will probably be ranting about keyword soup at some point in this video, but this is not the card that's going to push me to rant about keyword soup. This is just a very, very powerful special. It's a little bit of a draw engine for the deck. Again, I don't know how good keyword soup is going to be. If you're playing this in like Japan Soviet, which is like where some of the other like aid to the front is likely going to be played, I don't think you're playing Silesia because you already have expansion in that deck and you're already like very aggressively playing just a Japan aggro deck. So I don't know. Keyword soup in this game is something I'm not entirely sold on as a deck so far. A lot of the tools we've seen for it don't really fit in Soviet main. So again, this is something that I just don't have all the information for. But I think this is a powerful card. I just don't think it's like meta warping.
Let's go up a camera and see if JKing agrees.
So 44th Silesia on the scale of American cards to Kilkenny's is definitely in the middle.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting now. I mean, we haven't seen any Soviet elites so far. But so maybe all the Soviet elites suck. But normally, it's Soviets get the absolutely crazy elites, and then the specials are kind of like okay, they're interesting. Some are good, some are bad. Kirkenes is the best card of this expansion we've seen so far by a mile. And I think 44th Silesia might be the second best card of this expansion we've seen so far. 44th Silesia is actually insane. A 3-credit 3/3 ambush blitz draw a card deployment is just stupid. And I know you compared it to 6th Motors, which is true. I played a lot of 6th Motors. It is an incredibly powerful card. The only reason you don't play it in control is because it gets rid of all of your control cards. Soviets need card draw. And especially with Buy the Sword gone, and now you're relying on 5-year plan for your like big hand refill, and I'm not convinced that you're gonna be wanting to run 5-year plan if you can help it. If there's a world where you cannot run any big hand refill cards and instead run a bunch of units that draw 1 or 2 cards at a time, Soviet control would be very happy about that. Because it increases their just unit density, which especially if it's on Silesia, which is cheap and has blitz, so it can fight for units in the front line. And if there isn't units in the front line, it also has ambush, so it can hold the front line while you're doing other stuff. This card is an absolute beast. Plus, sometimes it also draws other cards. I agree with you. I don't think the keyword soup deck is going to be good, particularly. And like, if it is good, you play Silesia in it, but like, it's fine and it's not going to make the deck. I just think you play this in any Soviet deck because even if this just said deployment, draw a card, I think it would still be an incredible card that you play in the deck. And it says deployment sometimes draw more than 1 card. And you know, that's pretty good. In Soviet control, there's nothing that immediately comes to mind that you're going to consistently be drawing more than 1 card off of this, unless you just hit both Silesias. Maybe people start running Naval Brigade again just for the ambush guard. But yeah, I don't know. I think Silesia is a very good card. I agree. I don't think it's like meta defining or broken per se, but it's just like an incredibly good card that I think you not quite auto-include, but very close to auto-include.
Heavily consider, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the only 2 cards I can think of that you're running in Soviet control that like really synergize with this are Kirkenes, obviously, which is like nuts, and the 206 guards, the 3/6 shock guard that gains shock whenever it destroys a unit. Like maybe that makes its way back in Soviet control just to trigger Silesia.
Yeah, and it can trigger off some of the big guys, Naval Brigade, and the elite.
Armored train.
Yeah, armored train because heavy armor is a combat keyword. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, I have 2 views on this card. They both border on cracked. They're just slightly different. Stage 1, pretty much the thing we've just discussed, which is that I think there are just a lot of Soviet decks that the reason this card is a lot better than perhaps people think it is at times is that it's in a nation that needs card draw like you need water in a desert. Soviets really, really struggle for card draw, and there are plenty of decent targets for this to proc off, and if there is a way to grant keywords to things, it's not hard to grant keywords to other things, which leads me to my second point, and this is on the keyword soup deck. My current concern about keyword soup is the following. Either keyword soup is going to follow what we've seen so far and be largely awful, or keyword soup is going to have a good 1-drop, a couple of good 2-drops, maybe a 3-drop. This is a turn 4 play, and if keyword soup has the correct tools to use the initial 3 turns reasonably well and get good defensive keywords. By the way, all of you who think Blitz is the king of keyword soup, it's not. What you live in fear of is ending up with a bunch of ambush crap in the front line and not being able to trade it out that all has multiple keywords. There is the potential that this is a 2-of in your deck that might as well have been printed saying 3-cost, 1-op cost, blitz, deployment, draw 4 cards. If that turns out to be true, then keyword soup is going to be cracked. Or it's not going to turn out to be true when keyword soup is going to... Here's my keyword soup issue. it's a binary deck. It's either going to be cracked or it's going to be terrible. I don't see a way that it lands in the middle, and that bugs me, because the middle is a nice place. Can we spend more time in the middle? I don't object to this card on principle, but I do think it's rather good, and I just want to see, or at least for all of the keyword stuff to be out, so that everybody can understand what keyword soup will actually look like.
So, I just had a thought, actually. This is getting into deck building, but this is quick, and I'm cooking here. Do you run Men of Steel in Soviet control now?
Just give everything heavy armor.
Yeah, you can run it for just the hammer. It's a one that costs extra hammer, and hammer is like a decent card that you consider running. But a lot of cards in Soviet control will just have guard or just have blitz. So if you have Silesia and Men of Steel in hand, and you don't need it for the hammer, you can just give everything on board heavy armor 1, and then play Silesia and draw like 3 or 4 cards. It's like a hand refill.
Yeah.
Interesting little package there. Just throwing that out there.
Just something that I was experimenting with, and some of you will have run into me on ladder experimenting with it earlier in last season. I actually did run full sets of Men of Steel because I was using it in a slightly faster control deck, and I was using it in the hope to get Colm plus Men of Steel down, because it gave me really good stats really cheaply into the front line with heavy armor. Now that would give me really good stats with really good heavy armor, with the potential to throw some other random keyword on it, and then trigger this off it. I do think there is a world where actually you do seriously think about it if you want this to be a feature of your deck. I think the only thing that possibly saves us from that being an over-reality is the fact that, thank the Lord, this is a special card and not, for example, a limited.
Yeah.
But anyway, before we continue cooking, because
I do want to say one thing, just on the Men of Steel thing. I have actually recently played Men of Steel in like Soviet Finland tempo, and it was like not bad. And we might be talking about Soviet Finland keyword soup very, very soon. So just bear that in mind.
I'm aware. I personally, by the way, have been a Men of Steel believer, especially for players with limited collections who happen to own it, as being better than people give it credit for. Anywho, skipping along, we arrive in Finland. It's almost like this was planned, and yet it wasn't, because Discord. This is Infantry Regiment 25. This is a Finnish limited card. It is a 3-cost, 1-op cost, 2/5 infantry that has guard and shock. It also has, just incidentally, your HQ gets +2 defense when you attack with a unit with 2 or more combat keywords. Let's start with JKing, because I know Core's got some stuff to say here.
I'm just looking through the collection here. Has Finland received a bad card since they came out into the game in Winter Warfare?
No.
There's some bad cards that they got in the very first set, and there's a lot of cards that don't see play. But I mean, genuinely, like a bad card. I don't think so.
No, I can confirm, because I was looking earlier on today. No, I can't find one.
So Infantry Regiment 25 continues this tradition of Finland not being allowed to be given bad cards, because a 3-credit 2/5 guard is something that like people would honestly have considered playing like 3 years ago. A 3-credit 2/5 guard with shock is something that people would consider playing now. And a 3-credit 2/5 guard with shock that is also capable of healing you multiple times is just actually insane. Now, I don't know if you play this card. And this fits in with every Finnish card where it's like, it's good, it just doesn't necessarily see play. Where you can just run this on its own, like as a standalone card, maybe in a deck with only a couple other cards that have 2 or more keywords, or combat keywords, and, just this attacking by itself will give you 2 defense. Obviously, your opponent can remove it before you can attack with it. But, like, I don't think you need to trigger the healing on this at all for it to be a fine card. It's just, are you playing Finnish control? over other control allies? Is this enough to make it work? And then obviously you can then run this in like the 2 or more combat keyword super deck, and where this is going to be healing you a lot. But my question is just how I picture that deck is a very board-centric mid-range deck, and playing a slow guard that gives you healing feels like it's not something that is necessary in that deck. So I actually don't think that this is going to see any meaningful play, despite being like a just very clearly power-crept card.
Cool.
This, so far, out of all the reveals, is the card I'm most excited for. This, as everyone knows, I'm a big Finland believer. This is such a powerful potential control tool in a nation that doesn't really have control tools. But God knows I'm gonna force Finn control with this thing. Just playing this on 3, turn 4, playing the 3/3 Blitz shock guy that draws you a card, taking a trade in the front line. Hell yeah. I'm all for that. Yeah, this card, I'm gonna have a ton of fun playing this card. I'm in agreement with JKing. This probably isn't going to be meta relevant. It's probably not going to see much play at all. But God knows I'm going to force it into some decks and have a great time doing it.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because this is where you do see the diversity of the different people that I try and drag into the bunker. JKing is very right from in my ostensibly neutral position. I will say JKing is entirely correct in that this is probably not going to be a tier 1 deck card because Finland still hasn't really found itself a decent tier 1 deck ever, despite, by the way, my agreement that Finland also has still not managed to find itself a bad card ever. But Core is also entirely correct in that this card is really good value on a limited card, and definitely something that if you are a newer player, you're not going to object to having in your collection just because of how much of a ball ache it can be on the table for your opponent. Because the stats are really good on rate. The shock is, I mean, we are reaching the point whereby apparently we'll give shock to anything. Which is fine, I guess. Shock is new and interesting, and hey, it's not Blitz. But the HQ defense thing, the only thing I can't, and it might just be me, why, given that you can run 3 of these, is this not the first time or once per turn? Because one good Fury unit with another combat keyword, and everyone hates life. Granted, that's not going to happen on a regular basis, but yeah, I love this card. I love this. This falls into the same category to me as the Fokker, in that it creates just really interesting Finland cards that you can cook at tier 2 with. But I'm in the unusual position of having to fundamentally both agree and yet counterpoint both of the people below me because they're both right. Because depending on your perspective, it's one of those interesting cards. By the way, what did Poland ever do to Finland? I'm just asking. And on that note, we're just gonna roll two. Sorry.
I do have 2 other things I want to point out. One is I think this card would be much, much better if salvage was a combat keyword, which I think you could make the argument for, but obviously they're not going to change that. So unfortunately, it isn't. Because there's the like salvage guard guy who like maybe you could run with this. And then the other thing I want to mention is this is Finland's first healing card that I'm aware of, which means Germany is now the only nation that does not have HQ gain. They do have Alpenfestung, but
they're set.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's truism. Hey, you never know. German card. This is just like every time you bounce a card to hand, your HQ gains 6 defense. Again, stop it. Right. Moving to America, and also there's going to be a brief moment of me on stop it in a second. I didn't plan this. We arrive at America, and we arrive at an American elite. This is... Here we go. This is the professionals. This is a 7-cost, 2-op cost, 7/8, Blitz Bond Smokescreen card that has Destruction. All units in your deck get +2, +3, and a random combat keyword. Right. I'm going to get my point of view out of the way very quickly here. Yes, this card in the text and its function is insane. It's bonkers. It's ridiculous. You might as well give it some bells, a whistle, and its own marching band. I have never seen a more America on a big celebration day card in the history of my life. The only thing this is lacking is big glowing flashing effects every time you deploy it on board, unless they add them while I'm not looking from testing. However, every single deck that I have seen, I'm not saying you can't do good things with this card, by the way, but every single crafting plan I have seen thus far with this card has fallen into the aforementioned, I have infinite credits, all the time in the world, and once this triggers, my opponent is going to kill the second one that I somehow duplicated through at least 3 different attempted means that I've read so far that require even more credits, and then wait around for all of my +4, +6 units to hit the board and kill them. And also somehow, like 90% of those are going to get blitz out of random combat keywords. Notwithstanding how that is never going to happen on a regular basis, I do not deny the slight insanity of this card. And it's a meme of memes. I think there's a meme somewhere that is just, could we fit more keywords and text onto this card? But anyway, I shall let Core have a speech, mainly because I got his side just as I was having my own.
Yeah, this is a card I have a lot to say about. So, I hate this design. This design is something that never should be even considered. I'm going to be referencing a number of Legends cards throughout this rant, okay? If you want, I can send them to you guys so you know what I'm talking about. If not, it's fine. This card is... This exact effect was a meta-relevant strategy in Legends after the very first major expansion. It was set up by 2 separate units, a Praetorian Commander and an Echo of Akatosh. Praetorian Commander gave your entire deck +2/+2, and the Echo gave every single creature in your deck a random keyword. That deck was incredibly oppressive for about 2 weeks until they nerfed the commander and completely changed Echo. Now, I will say this. Legends, for one, the keywords in Legends are far better than the keywords in Cards. Cards has about 3 good keywords, everything else is like whatever. And Legends also had the upside of cards having Prophecy. Prophecy basically meant if you had a if you got attacked and a rune broke, runes happened at every 5 health. Every time a rune broke, you drew a card. If the card drawn had Prophecy, you could play it then and there for free. Which meant you could get a lot of very free big creatures with random keywords like every single time your opponent attacked you. So that was like the first instance of keyword soup in Legends, and that got changed after 2 weeks because everyone was sick of playing against it. It is a design I have seen in practice multiple times. It is a design I hated from day one, and it's a design I am unhappy to see in Cards. We are lucky in that 1939 have printed it in such a fashion that it is basically unplayable. So I am thankful for that. The fact that this is a destruction effect basically completely neuters the card. You have to get this killed, and then you have to draw and play the buffed units in a nation that has historically and very very notably poor card draw. So the fact that you're waiting until at least turn 9 to play this and blitz it, maybe taking a trade to get it killed, and then you have to start drawing the things, it means it's glacially slow. So it's going to be unplayable. It's just a design space I really, really dislike, just because I have so much experience playing against cards like this. And again, like the deck buff thing came back in Legends after a while because there was another card printed. I'd want to. We're lucky. We are very lucky in Cards that there is no way to pull multiple like units from your deck into play, and we're lucky that the keywords are on average worse. There's no drain. There's no ward. There's nothing like that. So that there's no like lethal or death touch either, which is also very, very nice. So yeah, this is just a card I really, really hate, just on principle, for how it's designed. I hate random keywords. I hate the fact that this gives everything random keywords. Echo of Akatosh was a massive design mistake in Legends. I'm afraid it's a big design mistake here. Again, lucky it's unplayably slow.
So, I want to paint a picture for you guys here. Turn 1, you do Greyhound. Turn 2, War Machine. Turn 3, Mayhem, return Greyhound to hand, drop out the professionals onto board. Turn 4, play Fortunes of War to trigger the destruction effect. Turn 5, second Fortunes of War, then trade it out somehow. And now every unit in your deck from turn 5 onwards has +6, +9, and 3 random combat keywords.
Is it after the mayhem? After this has happened, you reveal your Soviet ally 5-year plan. Draw a handful of buff units.
I mean, I feel like if every unit in your deck has +6, +9, and 3 random keywords, you only need 1 per turn.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, obviously that's a little silly. But Mayhem does get away with the bond, which is worth pointing out. Yeah, I don't think in a competitive deck that this card is going to be good outside of you are building the heaviest deck possible to counter an anti-aggro deck. In like terms of like a deck that could be versatile and beat multiple things, I don't think that this card is any good whatsoever. The other picture I want to paint for you is you play this in a deck with 3 Fortunes of War, all the ramp in the world, 4 Uncle Sams, and then no other units so that your Uncle Sams are guaranteed to hit the professionals. And then you don't actually buff anything, but you do trigger the professionals' destruction effect 8 times.
Just cause mental damage.
I feel obliged, and I am safe at this point because the cards are out. What he says, I can tell you, is possible because I did it purely and entirely to see if you could. Yes, you can. Is it worth it? No. But it is funny. But I will say, yes, you absolutely theoretically can do a whole... There's also a whole bunch of weird, as I mentioned earlier, with using some of the Germany weird pseudo-ramp tools, that you can theoretically build a deck that can pitch all of the units it doesn't care about, hyper-ramp a bunch of extra credits, throw this out, dupe it, do the other thing, assuming that you are either playing against the AI, which is how I did it, or playing against an opponent who, for some reason, doesn't have any suppress or decent removal or orders or effect and is willing to let you ramp to it. And someone is going to. It's going to happen.
I think... honestly, the closest to, like, the strongest deck you could build this in, outside of just the, like, anti-aggro deck, which is, like, a third of ladder all of the time, and I hate it. I hate this card, and I'm going to queue into it, like, every 4th game when the expansion drops, because there are so many Timmies in Cards. And if you are a Timmy, that is fine. I'm not trying to hate on you, but oh my goodness, do you make me not want to play this game.
Yeah, I like... There's an argument for it maybe in like US Italy. like in the slow US Italy mid-range / control deck, where you're playing this as your win condition versus like Soviet Italy, for example, where you get this into the front line, they have to destroy it, they can't suppress it, and then you just win because, oh hey, my big match he rolled Fury, so fuck you, I win.
Yeah, like as far as Timmy cards go, this is by far one of the best ones US has ever had. Because most of them are just like, oh, it's a massive unit and it's so big, and it's like, well, if they have any form of hard removal, they remove it no matter what the size is. Um, this obviously can get suppressed, it can get transformed, it can be permanently removed. But if you are able to trigger the destruction effect on this unit a single time in any deck in a game that's going to go slow, you are just drastically more likely to win the game.
Yeah.
And if there's like, if you're bringing it to like a tournament or it's just a mixed meta where there's about 50% aggro, 50% control, if you are playing a deck like US Italy that has some anti-aggro tools, that has survivability, you just play this as like a single card, because if you draw it against control, it's going to win you the game, and if you draw it against aggro, it's one dead card in your hand by your control, so you're used to having dead cards in your hand against aggro. The other place I could see you running it is as a package in Frontline, either just running the professionals or running like the professionals and mayhem, to just try to hit those two cards. And then like the next biggest card in your deck is like Sherman. And then if you're running like, 335 Ts, 4 Greyhounds, like some other stuff, Red Devils and whatnot, it's all of these small units that already have Blitz. So you're giving them +2/+3, and then it's like a 1 in 6 to get Fury, 1 in 6 to get Shock. And if you can just like trigger that in the game, it's gonna win you. Plus frontline, you're running like the 4 Shermans. You're gonna have like a bit more card draw than like a typical US deck. So like, yeah, I don't know. There's ways to play this card. It's not like unplayable garbage. But I think most of the decks people are going to play it in is probably going to be unplayable garbage.
Yeah, I think so. I will say it's somewhere on the main Discord, and I can't remember whether I was sensible enough to, in fact, censor myself at the time in the way that I'm about to. I believe I'm on record as saying this is quite possibly the most Timmy gets his bleep out card that 1939 have ever printed. Purely and entirely because, and again, I enjoy occasionally playing around with Timmy decks. This isn't anything against that style of play. My biggest objection to this card is how polarizing it is in effect. It is either dead or a win condition, and it's nothing in between. It either you get to the point whereby, as we have just talked in, by the way, welcome to Cards SOE deck building slapped onto the end of card reviews, as we've just demonstrated, that you either get to the point whereby this wins you the game, or boo-hoo, this and maybe 1 or 2 other cards in your deck were dead because you didn't need them. And I wouldn't be surprised to see this card end up getting changed or adjusted, if only to taper the utter ludicrousness of printing the effect. But that's just me.
I wish Bond had a number on it. Like, I wish you could
like
say
Bond
2,
Yep.
and then you take 2 draws of fatigue damage. Because we have yet to see a playable US Bond card. So, like, very likely you're playing this as the only Bond card in your deck. So if this is deployment, take 1 damage. Like, it's perfectly fine. At that point, Bond is like, you might as well ignore it on the keyboard, on the card. Also, this card is smokescreen for some reason. I genuinely don't know why, because this isn't Hearthstone. You can target units with smokescreen with orders. So like, it's not like it stops it from being suppressed.
I mean, let's be honest, it doesn't. This is my original thing about the bells on it thing. This is one of the reasons for it, and I'm going to go on a rant. Count the timer. First bear rant. Just the card has Blitz. As soon as it goes into the front line, it's operated, so the smokescreen goes away. In no world where you care about running this card are you playing it on turn 7 and praying that your opponent doesn't have removal, because that's idiocy. Because your opponent...
You play it on turn 7 and your hand is 3 fortunes of war.
because it's idiocy. Because you know in this game that as soon as you bank on that, your opponent is holding a suppression card, whether it be a Fokker or an M10 or just bloody duress. So smokescreen on this card is about as meaningful as printing summon 3 bunnies in a Magic the Gathering game 3 doors down. It doesn't do anything because you're never playing it with smoke unless... Oh God, I suppose maybe you do some stupidly crazy thing where you do some US Japan combo thing where you play one of the when it loses smokescreen triggers on this to make it even more pointless and annoying. I don't get it. I don't get this. Yeah,
I just realized you can use this with 1, 2, 3s.
Yes, you can.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like you can do like
sure
a US Britain deck where you're using 1, 2, 3s to create like these huge guide units, like Grenadier guards or the other one, the one that draws cards and stuff. And then you just like if your guts control, you just slap down the professionals. You get 2 of them. Maybe the one gets suppressed.
Yeah,
maybe neither gets suppressed, and then
Just because I have to fit it into every video I do recently, everywhere. Again, we land in the world where the biggest thing that's going to end up enabling this is ramp and, more specifically, War Machine. Anyway, that is the only way this is ever going to be good. And I have a feeling that between the 3 of us, we could actually do at least 90 minutes on this card and the design space around it alone. But I'm not going to let us because we're not even halfway through the cards we're doing yet. I think most of you have got the view that we have here that, yes, those of you who are concerned, at some point someone is going to have a miserable day powered by someone ramping into oblivion and doing something stupid with this and duplication. If you are that person, I'm sorry that you're that person, but live in the knowledge that the last 20 games when the player was trying to do it, it probably never worked. Right.
I do want to make 2 very quick points. First of all, the 1, 2, 3s thing, there is precedent because like during naval warfare when Germany, US was at its height, I was playing like Panther D in Germany, US just because sometimes you just go 1, 2, 3s Panther D and your opponent can't answer both of them and you win the game. So there is precedent for that actually working, just putting 2 giant things that need to be suppressed, and if they don't have this 2 suppressions, they lose. And also, just the US keywords, this set are all completely all over the place. Like the M3 Lee has 2 random keywords, ambush and smokescreen also makes no sense. So I don't know what they're doing with the keywords in America right now.
I think it's so that they have 2 combat keywords without
for Soviets
meaningfully changing the power level of the card in any way.
It does feel a little bit like there's this gentle push for the US to be the ally in the Soviet keyword deck. Just saying. Anyway. Moving on. Honestly, this time we actually are. Speaking of Soviets and keyword soup, this is Forged in Fire. This is a Soviet standard order. It's 2 cost, and it says, give a unit a random combat keyword. It doesn't have. Period. Draw a card if it now has 2 or more. Keywords. I'm fitting the last word in the sentence in because it bugs me that it doesn't exist. I know why. There are reasons, and it's to do with translation. If you're curious, ask in the comments, and I will explain to you why we have irritating limits until we start reformatting the way card images work. But that's a very different conversation, and one that I have to be very careful how much I say on. But there is actually a reason, and in the current situation, it's a good reason. Could it be changed? Maybe, but that's a different conversation. The second thing I want to say on this card, because it's a pinned comment in this card's reveals thread from me, because it set the universe on fire for about 10 minutes, is when this card first hit reveals, it came out with 1 credit cost. To be clear, I have already made sure that no one's going to sue me for what I'm about to say. That was just a mistake. I'm going to say it bluntly. It was not an insta-nerf. It was not a thing. I tell you with absolute certainty, and believe me, the guy just down below can probably confirm that of all the people involved, I can say with absolute certainty, this card was always going out at 2 cost. It was an error, and it was fixed. If you're reading the thread, check the pinned comments before you start exploding about specific things. Usually when it's something like this, we've taken the time to tell you why. Anyway, I just wanted to clarify that because I get asked it privately endlessly now that people have seen my name on a pinned comment. It genuinely was never intended. We have seen cards at so many different costs you would not believe. And often they didn't have the same text with the different cost. Anywho, focusing on the card as intended, this is I don't know. I'm going to just go with this probably sees play if keyword soup is a thing, but it's kind of a bit clunky and slow and a little bit indifferent, and honestly, I'm fine with that because the last thing I want to see is a hyper cheap, super efficient keyword soup enabling card if the deck is good for all of the previously mentioned reasons. Core, what do you make of Forged in Fire?
Unplayable at 2, broken at 1. we had a very similar card to this in Legends. There was a number of caveats attached that didn't draw you a card. It cost 1, and it was stapled to another creature that benefited from getting the keyword. So I have experience with this effect, and it's very, very good at 1 because you can, like, in Legends it was used to like potentially roll charge on things to like get your opponent that way. Sometimes it was used to roll drain in defensive decks, maybe if you had like a creature with 2 keywords already. But again, drain is not a keyword in cards we have to worry about, thank God. But yeah, at 2, unplayable. I don't think you even play this in the keyword soup deck. I don't think it's worth it. You can just cycle with Sickle for 1. And yeah, like this enables a handful of synergies. It enables your Silesia, but you're jumping through hoops to draw an extra card at that point. So
yeah, possibly fair. JKing?
Yeah, this card is unplayably bad. 2 credits to draw a card is too expensive. 2 credits to draw a card with upside is potentially playable, depending on what the upside is. In this case, the upside is pretty bad because you're getting a random effect. So you could get guard, but your unit's not going to be positioned correctly for guard because you don't know what it's going to get. Maybe you play a unit and then play it Forged in Fire on it to try to get blitz, but you also might get then shock, which is not going to be useful because it can't attack, or you know, you already attack with it and then you give it a keyword, but then you get shock, or you don't have the credits to attack with it, but then you get blitz, so then you're just wasting the blitz. Like there's way more situations where this is 2 credits, draw a card, do effectively nothing, than it is to be 2 credits, draw a card, upside. And even when it is upside, it's like, you know, you give it heavy armor. Would you play 2 credits, give a unit heavy armor, draw a card? No, and that's not even what the card says, because it also requires a different combat keyword to begin with. I don't even understand why the drawing a card is like conditional. I don't know why this isn't just give a unit a random keyword it doesn't have, draw a card. Yeah, this card is bad, and it's bad in the keyword deck, and it's bad in any other deck. The only situation I could see is someone like Baron von Glower cooking up a deck where you play like Caddy and it has blitz, and then you give it heavy armor, and then I don't know, you give it shock somehow, and then you play 4 Forged in the Fire, so you're guaranteed to get Fury, and then you play 4 final pushes on it. To get your 13 attack Fury Caddy, and then you hit face for 26.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
No, this card's bad.
Yeah, shout out Baron and the Cooks, by the way. There are people out there who are going to find weird things to cook with this, and more power to you. I actually think that's kind of nice that people can do that. But yeah, I don't think... I still slightly disagree in that I think maybe if the keyword soup deck is really, really good, you might play this just for the procs, especially given the other keywords that theoretically you could get. But we don't know enough to have an answer to it, and we certainly don't know if that deck's going to be any good, and I think it's safe to say that all of us are rather hoping it isn't.
One small note is this just says give a unit. So you can target an opponent's unit with this. So you can target your opponent's thing, draw a card, and give a guard to try and snipe it.
I mean, that is also true. You could try and high roll guard to get something that your opponent's got protected and knacker it that way, which is a fair point. See, we can come up with ideas. We're still doing it. Right, moving on to another US card, and yeah, okay. I have views. This is First Florida. This is a US standard, mind you, infantry. It is 5 cost, 1 op cost. It is a 4/4, but it just has destruction. A random friendly unit gets attack and defense equal to the attack of this unit. Clarification. Yes, hypothetically, yada yada, if you somehow make this into a 72/4 and it dies, the random friendly unit would get plus 72, plus 72. But I just wanted to get that out of the way because someone's going to ask. Yes, it would count any buffs that it's got when it dies. For me, this is I've seen cards like this in other games where they have this kind of destruction, give a biggish buff. They can be good. I'm personally a little bit confused as to what it's doing in US, given the push we seem to be seeing. Like, would you play this in frontline? No, it doesn't have blitz. It's turn sort of 5, and I have presumably anything else to do. I personally am not sold on this card, but I do think it might prove another pain in the ass to newer players, in similar vein to some other cards that have been printed in the past that I shall not name because I don't want to be called out in the comments, in that there are going to be times when this just becomes incredibly awkward because you don't want to have to kill it and then deal with something that gets +4/+4. Or plus whatever. Also, I like the art, but anyway. JKing, what do you make of the First Florida?
The First Florida is an interesting card from a competitive perspective. It's unclear to me whether it's going to be good enough to play like 1 or 2 of these in a frontline type deck or not. I'm leaning towards no, but I certainly would not confidently say you are never going to see this card in frontline. It depends a lot on the meta. Frontline doesn't have a lot of targets for suppression, so either suppressing this or suppressing the unit that gets the buff would both be high priority targets. So if there's a lot of suppression going around, you're probably not going to see First Florida. If it's a very aggressive meta, you're not going to see First Florida because it is quite slow. But just a 4 credit or a 5 credit 4/4 destruction, give +4/+4 to another unit is certainly not bad into mid-range decks, into control decks. So I can't confidently say it's not going to see play in constructed. In draft and at low ranks, this card is absolutely insane. As a standard in proper formats, this card is insane. And yeah, they somehow always give it to US. Like, it's always US that gets the broken standards that aren't quite good enough for competitive, but just like ruin every other format. Yeah, the only other thing I'll say is this fits the Fortunes of War professionals deck.
Knew he was going to say it.
Oh, come on, it was predictable. It's also accurate. It does. I mean, if you're doing that. Cool. Any other thoughts beyond the two of us, who I think are mostly leaning back to the old California and how much of an arse that was at low levels, too?
Yeah, I think I'm a little more certain than JKing on that this card is bad. It's competing directly for, like, with some very competitive cards. Like, I don't think you run like Rangers and First Florida together. I think you're just at that point, like your deck at that point, if you're playing like frontline, you're playing mid range, your deck at that point is like, I think, a little bit too heavy because you're also playing Shermans. Like, do you really want to be playing a 5-drop that takes 2 turns to get going? So, and it's not that the effect is bad, because this effect, again, Tesla reference, we did have this effect in Legends. It was on a 3-cost 3/3 that gave another thing 3/3 when it died, Haunting Spirit. Saw play from start to finish, was a fantastic card in aggro and mid-range. The difference is that it came down a lot sooner than this does, and it was a lot easier to control in Legends, because when your board was full, you could just sack a unit to play another one, so you could sack it to give a thing a buff. So yeah, I just think it's a bit too slow. Again, like you said, draft and at low ranks, this thing is going to be absolutely insane, and it's going to like ruin some people's days. But I think at the top end of the ladder, it's just like yeah, it's just a little bit too slow. I think to make it.
Yep. Right, in the interests of general pacing, let's go to a Polish card. Let's go to Exiled Forces. So this is a Polish limited order. It's 5 cost, and it says add a copy of target unit to your support line. Destroy it in 3 turns. So this does follow the same lines of some other Polish cards that we've seen recently that have this kind of ticky destruction thing going on. Core, let's start down there with you. Views on Exiled Forces?
I think it's interesting. I think this is like much more balanced than something like 1-2-3's was. It's much more expensive. I mean, it's nice that it can target an opponent's creature, so you can copy one of your opponent's units and then take a trade with it, for example. So like turn 7, you're against like Soviet Italy control, they've got a big matchy, you can exile forces and just trade the matches out. So it's got some interesting stuff it can do. This seems to be one of the things that 1939 have like finally landed on that Poland gets to do, which is like convert things, it gets to do intel stuff, and it gets to have its things blow up in 3 turns for some reason. Like we saw with Iron Division, we've seen it with Romanian Bridgehead. Like, I don't know why 1939 think that like Polish units blowing up should be a thing. Like, why do all Polish units want to kill themselves? Is is it because they're in Poland and all Poland cards are bad?
I do want to say this does have a nice kind of mirror with the 1-2-3s. Like Poland appears to get the 3-2-1s. In that's all you've got. Do something good with it. JKing. Convince me this card is good.
This card is absolutely a hot pile of trash. It's also called Exiled Forces and has 0 synergy with Exile, which is interesting. I think that this card is, generally speaking, substantially better than the next card we're going to look at. But like, how are you using Exiled Forces? You can use it on your opponent's unit to just get a 5-credit copy of the biggest thing that they play. You could use it on your own unit to get a 5-credit copy of the biggest unit you play.
Wait! I want to take you on a journey.
Here we go.
I feel like I know where this is going, but okay.
Right. So, early on in the game, you're playing US Poland. Early on in the game, you rampart.
If at any point anyone mentions Fortunes of War, I swear to God.
Then, late in the game, having used all of the ramp tools, you drop the professionals. You then target this with the professionals. You then target one of the other versions of the professionals with Fortunes of War, and it... I couldn't resist. Please, if you're listening or watching, don't do it. It's not worth the effort. But hey, it would mean that you guarantee that in 3 turns, you're the professionals, dies and procs.
Yeah. Like, the only thing I can think of is playing this in, like, an OTK deck where you're duplicating a unit with, like, Blitz and Fury, but this doesn't work like Hearthstone where you duplicate a unit with all of its current stats and added abilities. I believe that you get a copy of the base effect of the unit, which means that it's just worse than playing a second copy of that unit unless you're playing an elite unit, but like, what combo is this with Polish ally that is relied on an elite unit and then duplicating it? Yeah, this card is rather bad. And like, I think the most comparable thing would be Partisans, but Partisans allows you to attack with the unit immediately.
Yeah.
Whereas this doesn't. So if you're copying a unit from the opponent that doesn't have Blitz, you can't actually trade it out immediately. You have to wait a turn.
Yeah, at which point it's only got 2 turns of effective life. Yeah, it is. I am very much on the pile of. if you didn't catch the joke of my earlier comment, you're not paying attention. It's a bad card. And moving on to... I'm sorry, but it is a good segue on It's a Bad Card. We arrive at another Poland card. Oh dear, I'm sorry, Poland. And I now have a lot of Polish viewers who are probably going to hate my pronunciation in a minute. So this is the 5th Wilno Brigade. And this is a 6-cost, 1-op cost, 3/3 special infantry that has deployment. Convert this unit into target unit. I don't have words. I just don't. It's rare that I start this heavy. I'm not sure I have words for how bad this card is. I just... Oh, God. Anyway, someone convince me I'm wrong, or please tell me I'm wrong and somehow this is good. Or at least not as bad. Or at least not as bad as I think it is.
Wilno Brigade? I will no be playing this brigade. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's overcosted. I think that 1939 learned their lesson after 1-2-3s with these like clone effects. I think they realized that they can't do this for cheap anymore because 1-2-3s just broke everything so quickly. So I'm a-okay with this being expensive and not really playable. There's interesting things you can do with it. It says convert, which matters in like decks such as like Soviet Poland and Germany Poland. Soviet Poland, you have targets for this that are like pretty good in the deck that you really want to run. Things like armored train, just train on 5, turn 6, Wilno, make a second train is like mostly okay. So like there's interesting stuff you can do with it, and likewise there's interesting stuff you can do with Exiled forces. They're interesting cards. If nothing else, Poland got really, really interesting cards, but they're unplayable.
All right, so Core's working very hard with the word interesting. JKing, where do you fall between the poles between my good God, I have no words and Core's interesting?
I think that is a pretty generous use of the word interesting, personally speaking. I guess it's in the eye of the beholder, because it's never going to see any real play.
Right.
So if you're touching this card, it's because you think it's interesting, I suppose. Yeah, this card is an absolute piece of trash. It's more expensive Faceless Manipulator from Hearthstone with a worse effect in a game that is harder to use that effect in the first place. And Faceless Manipulator was a card that like saw some competitive play. And yeah, this why did it have to be Poland? Like, I'm fine with them printing these two unbelievably awful cards that like step into a design space that hasn't really been touched in cards. And like, I'm fine with these cards existing in principle. It's just, why did these two cards need to be given to Poland, which is historically the worst nation in the game and has the least playable cards in the game? And you're like, let's give these two clearly unplayable experimental cards to a nation that it does not fit any of their existing archetypes, and it is like a healthy chunk of the new cards that they are getting from this expansion. And like, yeah, you guys can talk all you want about, like, I'm not you, just the hypothetical audience can talk all they want about like how much play Poland has seen in the most recent expansion, but that's because of like two playable cards. And like that doesn't reflect the power level of the nation as a whole. And these cards both being given to Poland is rather depressing. Like, cards this experimental and this very clearly not going to see play should be given to a main nation that has the depth of card pool to be given experimental cards.
I have to agree. I will say, do you know where I personally think these cards would have fitted perfectly? And I'm not being at all facetious. This is genuine feedback if you're 1939 and watching this. Where I would have been happy to see both of these card effects, given what they do and the pool and the meta at the time, just print the same effects and slap them on something German. Germany can eat the hit right now, and it has at least some synergy with at least some of what you're trying to do. Poland can we just do better? Because seriously, what did Poland ever do to Finland at this point? It's
Just
yeah.
Just a note on like Poland getting like unplayable garbage all the time. It's funny, like it's true. They do get unplayable garbage all the time, but you saw how quickly with like a tiny change to Carpathian and Ulan like made Poland extremely relevant for like mid-range in Soviet and Germany. I do think like a lot of Polish cards are like just on the bubble that lead like just some changes, and then suddenly Poland is like really, really good. So, but yeah, no, these two cards, I don't think you can do anything to save them. If you made like Wilno maybe like 4K, it would be like worth running because it can target opposing creatures, so you can grab one of your opponent's things. So
yeah, it's oh lord.
Yeah, at 4 credits, I think it would be good, but
yeah,
at 4 credits, like obviously duplicate a unit for 4 credits is much better than duplicate a unit for 6 credits
For
because
6.
it means that it just increases the range of units that can be duplicated to gain any amount of tempo or value.
Yeah, I know I have a lot of Polish viewers and members of my Discord, and reprezam. I really am, but honestly, and I know I pronounced that wrong before you all, but I'm trying. My Polish is very rusty. For those who don't, that's sorry. And I am sorry. Moving on to the nation that I think these cards should have been in. And to a card that is, oh yeah, this is going to be if you want a moment to hit pause, make another cup of cocoa, this is probably a good one. This might be a thing. We have arrived at one of the most active Discord response cards I've ever seen in my life. One of the cards that I've received the most directed messages about in the time that I've been in this game. This is the 169 Grenadiers. This is a German elite. It is a 5 cost, 1 op cost, 5/6 infantry. And the thing that seems to have lit the world on fire is the fact that it has the following text. The enemy discards a card at random after giving an order. Right. Again, because it is a PSA somewhere up on the Discord. After means after. I have checked. I have tested. I have even checked with the design team in private before I posted the pinned message and then had to screenshot and send it repeatedly because nobody bloody read it after I answered the question. After means after. So if you hit this with something that kills it, removes it, turns it off, no, it doesn't trigger, because it's gone. Anyway, notwithstanding the clarification, and before I get into my own views, which are not small on the card and the response to the card, let's start with JKing, because he beat us to the Psy contest this time.
This is a frustrating card to see added into the game because it's like Blackwatch. If Blackwatch, instead of saying enemy orders cost +2, instead said enemy orders cost +200, because you almost can't play an order while this is on the board unless that order kills this, without immediately losing the game. The only possibility is if the order you play wins the game for you on the spot, or if the order you play is the last card in your hand. Because, like, I don't understand why this unit is a 5/6 for 5 with 1 op. Like, this unit could have been like a 2/6, and you'd still consider playing it. This unit could have been like a 3/6 2 op. This unit could have been a 5/5. It could have been like a 4/4 and you'd consider playing it. Like, I don't understand why clearly the best nation in the game right now, or at the very least one of the 2 best nations in the game, needed an elite with competitive on-curve stats with a passive effect that says win the game some of the time. Because there are certain decks that will not have the ability to remove this in one order.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be decks that don't have the hand, like they have the cards that remove it with one order, but they don't have those cards in their hand, and they rely on orders to get to that point. Yeah, this is just a perfect card to be played in basically any German deck. Not quite if you're like going full Heinz frontline Blitzkrieg stuff, but like if you're playing like an aggressive deck, you play this in your support line, and then your opponent's kind of forced into playing orders to deal with your more aggressive units. If you're playing a control deck, you try to get this behind a guard, or you just throw this out on curve whenever, because it's gonna absolutely ruin your opponent's hand if they can't remove it immediately. And if they remove it immediately, you played a 5 credit on curve guy that forced out removal immediately. That's fine. Like worst case, you go even on this card. Best case, it immediately wins you the game.
Yeah, so one of the things I will say, picking up on a point that's made, because I'm going to grab it while it's there, and it's one that I feel quite passionately about. I am less... I don't like the text on this card, to be clear, because I don't really think it's necessary in the game, and I definitely don't think it's necessary in Germany. But that's the like, this text would make slightly more sense to me on the right body in, I don't know, Soviets, I guess, but even then I'd rather not see it in the game. What I do kind of really struggle with is, okay, so this lands on the board, and as JKing points out, you don't have something that instantly answers it. You can't instantly destroy it with an order. You know what would have been the saving grace for that? If this was something that could be traded relatively efficiently. But it can't. I don't... Give it 6 health if you really must, but why on earth does this need 5 attack? It's not an aggressive unit. You're not going to be smashing face with it. All it does is make it next to impossible to trade it efficiently. And if you want to push board-centric play, and I do, by the way, I'm on record as saying that I like things that limit, to a certain extent, the preponderance of orders in this game. Make this brutalize orders, but be really, really weak, or at least tradable to bodies on board. Don't make it. I don't. I'm struggling to find patient words for this, and that's unusual for me.
Like, they could have just made this deployment the opponent discards a random order. And then, like, there's a lot of situations where that's actually better, but it actually caps the value you can get out of this. And sometimes it's not going to do anything. Sometimes it's not going to hit the best thing. But it's like, if you wanted to just be like, okay, give them a unit that kind of counters some orders, don't make a card that's just like, you can't give orders until this leaves the board.
Yeah.
You just lose.
I just, anyway, Core, before you, the old boys, we be ranting. Core, where do you feel?
I mean, this is also a design space I really don't like seeing. For what it's worth, I'm much lower on this card than JKing is, but I'm also more than likely incorrect. I think this card is like, it's fine. I mean, there's not many decks that I can think of that I would like really want to run this, because it's in the fight. Germany's 5-drop slot is incredibly competitive. It's got the Henschels, Jagd bombers coming back into the 5-drop slot. I think the saving grace for this card is it comes down to turn after crossfire. I think that's like the most relevant thing, is that because this does nothing versus aggro 99% of the time. The aggro deck is just going to jam the front line and kill you before you can do anything with the 169th. But the fact that they can go turn 4 crossfire, turn 5 run 169th, and then you're kind of in a position of, oh god, now I can't really do anything. I think that's like the biggest thing with this card. It's primarily a removal check more than anything else. A lot of decks in the current game have means of answering this via either destroying it. You've got extended barrage, dagger strikes. You can suppress it, suppression, duress, Fokker. Because it doesn't have a text box after the suppression resolves, you don't discard, so it can just be suppressed. And I do think we are going to see a bit of a resurgence in the number of suppression, or like the amount of suppressions in the metagame, because there's a lot of things in like upcoming that are very, very suppressible. So I think like off the top of my head right now, the only deck I would consider running this in is like in a slower Germany mid-range deck that just wants to have a card that just absolutely beats control every now and again, that can't remove it instantly. Because against mid-range, like the body is fine, but it's slow. You're skipping turn 5 to up to 5/6 that then has like it doesn't do anything proactively the turn you play it. It requires your opponent to want to have orders to play that turn. So I don't know. I'm lower on it than JKing. I'm open to being very incorrect. This card could be like absolutely insane, but I do hope this card does not stay the same because it's just an unhealthy piece of design.
The one positive thing I can say about naval warfare is a lot of the cards from naval warfare had the added text once per turn, which is something
Yeah.
that didn't exist a lot prior in cards. And it's like, okay, this is healthy. You can print powerful effects and then limit the amount of times per turn it can trigger in a world where you can trigger it multiple times. Why does this not say once per turn? Like, it sucks that it's like, oh, I'm in a situation where I have to play like a convoy or a similar draw order. Because I need to find something else to do on this turn, and I'm going to sacrifice discarding a random card in my hand to do that. And then you play that, and then you find like another order to play that deals with a different unit on board or buffs up your units to let you trade into this or something like that. And it's like, okay, well now I have to lose a second card on top of that, and now you've played 4 cards to deal with this one card. Yeah, it's quite silly, and I think I think that's a reasonable examples you gave, Core, on situations where this card isn't going to be like fantastic. The one that I would disagree with though is against aggro. Particularly, I think Jagro plays a lot of cheap orders, and most of their cheap orders do not immediately answer this. So like if you're Jagro, oftentimes like when Germany plays down like a Henschel or a Panzergrenadier or one of their other like big 5-6 cost guys, their play is to do like expansion, type 94, pin it for a turn, and then like type 93, go face with everything. The problem is if you do that now, you're discarding 3 cards in the process, and they're random cards, and that is very relevant because they might discard like your desperate measures that you want to play the next turn, or your Aichi or something like that, or your first expansion discards the second expansion, and now you're hand locked moving forward. And yeah, that's kind of the world where I think it's like oftentimes this card's going to come out and it's going to force 2 unit trades into it immediately. Because also it's like a 5-6 on curve. So you're probably not traded 1-for-1 units into this. So I think a lot of decks are going to have to just immediately 2-for-1 unit trade into this, which is a massive tempo loss.
Yeah, I think this is where you and I, JKing, tend to agree on this card, is that I think this card very much punishes responding to it in an effective way unless you can just snap your fingers and remove it, which Core, you make a fair point. There are cards out there that answer it. But like there are also decks out there that people have been enjoying, whether you like that they've enjoyed them or not recently, that like this like Legions / Intel, this card hates on. Shuffle, this card hates on. Buffs, this card hates on. Sad face. But there are certain archetypes and plays out there, and even as an air player, there are so many times that if I'm playing an air deck and I want to get like Cass out or something similar, or out with the old on a Soviet deck, to then be able to have the body, or God forbid, try and deal with this with Claim the Skies. Like, I don't know. I think if we had to go into this space, could we not have, 1, done it in a different nation, and 2, made it less brutal body-wise? But I think collectively you can see we all have relatively disappointed faces. Yeah. I'm not in the same doomsaying, by the way. I do have to say, call out, I am aware of all of the people who in Discord were doomsaying the end of the world with this card, and I don't think it's actually that bad for many of the reasons that Core has outlined. What I do dislike about this is it's giving another really, really potent tool to a nation that just doesn't need it. Like, Germany doesn't need the help. Could we not just have had an expansion where Germany gets some coal for Christmas? Anywho, before we carry on beyond any length of it, let's go to Britain. Let's arrive at the King's African Rifles. By the way, if you're curious about this regiment, go do some research. The wiki and the various regimental histories that you can find might prove interesting to you. The King's African Rifles is a new British special card. It is a 3-cost, 1-op cost, 4/4 infantry, and it has deployment. Choose a unit in hand. Give it +1/+1. And bond. Or, if it already has bond, give it +3/+3 instead. Right. This card is really interesting to me because this card is a very big push for the new British bond thing. Because this text effect is really quite strong. The body is really quite good. It lacks blitz, sad face. But that doesn't seem to be the direction that Britain is going with this bond thing. There's a feeling of like soak, and then hit back with the pressure of like units that you can't answer, which, by the way, I find interesting. But I will say this is certainly, for me, one of the strongest effects that we've seen the British bond archetype get. And since I can see him nodding, and I'll try and leave any dissenting opinions to the end, we'll go to Core first. What do we think?
Yeah, I said that the Finnish 2/5 was like the card I'm most excited about from this set. This is the second card that I'm most excited about. This card pushes one archetype and exactly one archetype, and that is British mid-range, which is something I never thought I would say. It's too slow to be considered, I think, in aggro. But it's also not an effect you want in control. So this slots so neatly into mid-range, and it hits a couple of very key cards and enables a handful of very key things. First of all, it's a 3-cost 4/4 for 1-op. It's got them Kirkenes stats, so it's nuts. And secondly, the actual, like, just on stats alone, playing this on 3, it's going to be very difficult to remove, which means it's very easy to maintain your bond while this is in play. And then we get to, like, the text box. We can pretty much ignore the first half because you're never playing this on a unit without bond. There are exactly 2 units that you want to play this on. One of them is the Valentine that we saw at the start of like the spoiler season, the 2-cost 2/3 with Fury. This is exactly the card that the Valentine needed to be worth consideration. And I think because King's African Rifles exists, Valentine will see play. The fact that you can play this on, say, turn 4, target the Valentine in hand, the Valentine comes on 5 as a 5/6 Blitz and Fury with 1-op is insane. And this also combos with a card we're going to be talking about very, very soon, one of Britain's new elites, the aircraft, which comes down as like an 8/7 with Blitz. So yeah, this card is exactly what Brit mid-range needed, which was a big dose of lethality, as well as a big dose of board presence. This is something I'm very, very excited to play with.
I unashamedly am in the same camp. This is something I wanted to see. I don't know whether it's going to be tier 1, but I kind of don't care because I just want to see Brit mid-range be a playable deck. But I am interested to get a more competitive player's view on this, and that's one of the reasons I'm really happy that we have JKing here for this one. So JKing, how do you feel about King's African?
So King's African Rifles is a incredibly powerful card. Of the cards we've seen so far, it is by far the best card that pushes this like sort of tempo British bond type deck. The synergies with Valentine are very, very powerful. You could even build it as a combo deck If like the mid-range part doesn't really work out, you could just run like a couple Valentines, 2 King's African rifles, and then you just keep it in your hand. You buff it twice. Maybe you return African rifles to your hand somehow and buff it a third time, something like that. Get it up to like 11, 12 of stats with Blitz and Fury, and then on a later turn where you have enough pieces to get through guards and clear the front line, you drop down the Valentine and absolutely nuke your opponent from space. So it's obviously, every time an expansion comes out, there's new ways to kill your opponent in a single turn. This seems like the best new way to kill your opponent in a single turn that we've seen in a while. Not necessarily saying that it's gonna see play as a combo deck. It's no push, but it has potential as a combo deck. This card on its own is stupidly powerful on curve. In the Bond midrange deck, but the issue I'm seeing is you're gonna have a deck that is like, if you draw King's African Rifles on 3, and then you can follow up with like a buffed up Valentine on 4 or 5, or you play the RAF Mustang, which we'll look at in a bit, on turn 4 or 5 with the buff, then that's a very powerful swing turn. The issue is decks need good standards and limiteds, or a overwhelmingly large amount of good elites and specials. And my worry is that this deck is going to have like 5 incredibly good cards that have incredible synergy with each other, and then like 25 mediocre cards. And that does not typically make a good competitive deck. So yeah, I think it's a little hard to say. It's also a little difficult to rate because we've never had anything like this. It's also more combo potential is you could play a King's African Rifles to give something in your hand +1/+1 in Bond, and then play a second King's African Rifles to give something in your hand +3/+3 because it now has Bond, even if it didn't have Bond printed on it. So you can use 2 King's African Rifles to give any unit in your hand +4/+4, which, like, if people figure out another way to get like a Blitz Fury on something else. But yeah, in general, stupidly powerful card. I'm going to be excited to play with it, but I'm not convinced that a special is enough to make the deck.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, but I'm not going to temper my excitement, if only because it means that I can like do a field marshal run on a. I have a whole thing. I have ideas, but they all just revolve around the fact that I can like rep my nation without making brr sounds. But we'll see how we go with it. Let's see what's next. And next up is more Britain, and this time it's a British elite. This is the Pompadours. Yes, really, go look it up. It's legit, even if it sounds silly. These are a 3-cost, 1-op cost 3/5 guard, and they say, while in hand, your HQ gets +1 defense each time you play a card with Bond. Right. JKing, you can go first. I'm saving myself till last.
So once again, the first thing I'm going to mention about this card is just the stats. A 3-credit 3/5 guard is premium stats. Again, we played 3 credits 3/4 guards in the past in competitive tier 1 decks. 3 credits 3/5 guard with additional upside is just a blatant example of power creep. The actual upside is not particularly relevant, because if you're playing the full Bond deck with like a lot of cheap Bond cards and you're playing it like as a tempo deck, mid-range, aggro, whatever you want to call it, whatever it ends up working out to be, you don't really care about gaining additional defense. Like, I get the idea is that it means you don't it lowers your risk of killing yourself with triggering all your bonds, but in that deck you want to be not triggering your bonds ever, and then at that point it's like, well, do you need 25 health as opposed to 20 health? Not really. Especially because I imagine this deck is going to have very little, like next to 0 comeback potential. If you get fully knocked off the board, I feel like you're just going to lose. So health total does not matter for that. Where I more see this card being played is in a Britain control deck that runs maybe only even 3 Bond cards with the I'm forgetting the name, but the 2-credit draw 2 cards Bond.
Yep.
Yeah. I feel like you just play that and you play this card, and sometimes you gain like 1 defense from that, sometimes you don't, and then sometimes you just play this card on turn 3 as a 3-credit 3/5 guard and you're happy. I don't think this card's like gonna shake up the world or anything.
Cool.
I think this effect is like supremely interesting. I agree. I think this is likely just going to slot into control. I do think you play land grills in control alongside the new Mustang. I do think I think the Mustang is just, I think, one of Britain's first like easy auto includes across all archetypes. It's so insane. We're going to talk about it in a minute. But the fact that, like, even if you're just gaining 3 health off the Pompadours just by it sitting in your hand, you're happy with that. Just considering like how many games come down to you losing to exactly Bismarck for 8, for example. So like in a lot of matchups, just incidental health gain, just like every now and again gaining a single point or like 2 points of health can swing an entire game. I think this is going to just be a case of it'll sit in your hand for a couple of turns, you'll gain a health or 2, and then you'll deploy it when you need to actually block HQ damage. So yeah, I think this is still going to see play in control, and I do think there is potential for this in the Bond deck, depending on what other Bond cards we get. If we get some more like, if we get like 1 or 2 more like slightly more defensive Bond pieces, then maybe there's more of an excuse to run it. But like even in the Bond deck, you're gaining like so much health. There's like zero investment cost to gain the health from this, which is really, really nice. It doesn't need to be on board. You get to continue doing your tempo game plan while also healing, which is, I think, really, really neat.
I agree. I think you probably play it in the Bond deck. Not because I think the healing matters at all. I think it's because Britain doesn't have 40 good cards to put in that deck, and you basically just play it as if you don't hit King's African Rifles on turn 3, what's the next best British unit to play on turn 3? It's probably the Pompadours for a 3-cost 3/5 body. That it's unironically probably the next best unit you can play in the deck without triggering the effect once.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that's my biggest thing about this, is it gets my design head going with the interesting space that this card is, which is just fascinating to me in that it has this interesting duality of being this theoretically, if it found the right deck, passive effect that could be good. I don't see what the hell it's good in currently, but it's a passive effect from your hand, which in card games historically, certainly in some games that I've come across, is not nothing. But it's also, like JKing says, it's just even if it didn't have guard, it's still a decent body. With guard, it's a premium guard, and it's a 3-drop in a deck that's probably going to need them until we see more cards added to it. Even if we do get loads more good cards in this, I don't know whether it's going to fill out a whole new archetype in a single expansion. That's always hard to do, particularly if that archetype does the dangerous thing of leaning more mono with just tiny bits of allied support. So I personally, by the way, thoroughly intend to cook with this card, but that is a me thing. And I like it. It's interesting, but it segues very much into the much more of all of the cards we have seen in this archetype. We're now going to talk about one of the most interesting, because it talks about the duality of Bond. Let's talk about the RAF Mustang. RAF Mustang is another British elite. It is a 3-cost, 2-op cost, 5/4 fighter with Blitz and Bond. It also has some text. The text says your non-British cards cost +2. Coming back to that in a minute. And it also says draw a card when the enemy targets or attacks this unit. Right. This card's bonkers. This card is ludicrously good. This card is going to go in basically every British deck that can find a good reason to fit it, for no reason other than it is 5 cost, 5 deployment damage. It's just good. notwithstanding everything else that you can say about this card, it's just nuts. It's just a really good aircraft. It does have, however, some interesting design cues. One, I never thought, even with the possibility of seeing more kind of do you need an ally questions asked in this game, we would see anything quite as, hey, allies don't matter, as your non-British cards cost +2. I would like to point out that adding +2 to the cost of every single non-British card you have is huge and brutal. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, and there are plenty of ways to play around it, so it's not relevant. But it is design space that fascinates me, because it is a very big punish for running allied cards. Obviously, as long as this thing's alive, we'll get to that. And then the second part, draw a card when the enemy targets or attacks this unit. If it wasn't good enough to put this threat on the board and slap you about the face with it, just to be clear that we would like Britain to be a bit more able to finish out games nowadays, let's punish the crap out of you for daring to try and do anything about it. But I unashamedly quite love this card's bonkersness, because it's going into a nation that doesn't really have anything like this and has just lost one of its most venerable and hard-working, even if it was barely up to snuff, sorry, Wellington, finishers, has just gone. And we get this. And damn. Anyway, Core, you seem to be chomping at the bit to say possibly some very similar things.
Yeah, this thing is cracked in half. Just looking at this through the lens of just like, for every British archetype, yes, the +2 to ally cards is a big tax, but who cares? This just kills your opponent if it's left on the board, and if they try to answer it, you draw a card. So not only does this, for 5 credits, threaten recurrent 5 damage to the HQ, it also replaces itself when your opponent has to inevitably answer this. Yeah, this thing is cracked in half. With the bond cards, with King's African Rifles, this comes down as an 8/7, which means you're dealing 8 for 5 credits. That is insane rate. Like, control, you play this as a finisher, you play this as a board control tool, potentially. Aggro, you play this as like one of your best finishers. This thing, it costs 3. It's a 5/4. This thing is insane. I'm sorry, I'm having another Kirkenes moment. This card is, in my opinion, I think this may be one of the strongest cards of the set. I could be wrong. Maybe the non-British card cost +2 thing is such a massive detriment that it's unplayable. But God knows, I don't think I'm going to care about having to pay an extra 2 for my ally cards, because I'm never going to have to play them because my opponent is just going to be dead. So, yeah, this card I think is absolutely crazy.
And moving to the competitive expert among us.
So, I can already tell you exactly what's going to happen with this card. This card's going to come out. People are going to be like, hey, this card looks really good. I'm going to test it out. And as anybody with a brain can tell you, this card is going to be the best card of the set, and it's going to be played in every single British deck. It's going to be played in every single British deck at Worlds. Worlds is going to be won by somebody playing this card in their deck. The first balance patch after Worlds, this card will get nerfed to 4, and it will stay in every single British deck. And then it will probably never be touched again, and then rotated in the first possible rotation, like a year and a half from now. And I can tell you that with like 85% certainty. You can come back and quote me on this video in a year and a half from now. Did that not exactly happen? If this card was 5 cost, still 2 up, still bond, everything is in the same, it's just cost 5 instead of 3, you would play this in every single available nation, in every single standardly played and built deck in this meta to the first meta. And this card is at 3. Like, this card is on on paper, if you zero meta, you don't know anything about how the game is like functionally played based on how all of the other cards in the collection work. I think on paper, Kirkenes is like maybe slightly better than this, just in terms of like evaluating all of the keywords on it. In reality, though, in the reality we live in, this is miles better than Kirkenes, and Kirkenes is miles better than like 99.99% of cards in the game. This is by far the best card. I can't fathom seeing a better card than this printed in Homefront. This is probably the best unit that has ever been released in cards ever. This card is stupidly broken. There is not a world where you don't play this card in every deck. If you're playing in the Bond deck, you do turn 3, King's African Rifles, buff Mustang. Turn 4, King's African Rifles, buff Mustang. Turn 5, you hit your opponent in the face for 11. If they're lucky, they have Suppress to drop your 3-drop back to only a 5/4 after taking 11, and you still draw a card off of that. And now they've shut down the downside of playing this card because it got suppressed to bring it back to a 5/4, and they still can't deal with it. So then you hit them in the face for 5 again, and they're at 4 health on turn 6, and you drew a card. Or you play it in air, because it's an aircraft, and you can play CAS on this. This could have been deployment your non-British cards cost +2 for the rest of the game, and you would still play this card. What? I'm done.
To be clear, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
This card is ludicrous.
You know what? I'm A-okay with it because Britain bloody needed the help.
And Core has just saved me from the statement that I was about to make. Of all of the nations that you could have given this to, I'm fine with it being Britain. It still does need a nerf. It's still going to need a fix or a rework before it gets rotated into retirement as fast as 1939 can find a big enough wheelbarrow. Because JKing's not wrong. If this isn't everywhere in Worlds, I am going to be astounded. Or it's going to have been emergency patched. Because it's nuts. It's just, it is very hard, as you have probably gathered from all of us, from the new to the veteran of the game to the veteran of card games. Period. It is extremely hard to put into words how above rate. I don't think the phrase counts, but how above rate this card is. For an elite, for anything. And yeah, damn.
If this card was released at 4 credits, I would say this card is stupidly overpowered and it's stupidly pushed, but I'm fine with it existing for a couple of months for Britain. And then it should be nerfed to 5.
Yeah.
Instead, this card's released at 3. No card should ever be released like this. I don't care how bad Britain is. No.
No, as much as everyone knows how much I love Britain and how much I love Britair, and yes, if you're wondering, of course this is going in my Britair decks. Do I look stupid? Don't answer that in the comments. But God, he's not wrong. Like, as
the funny
much
thing is, I can see a world in which they just nerf this by dropping it to 4 attack, and that's it. Just make it a 4/4.
I think as a 4/4, if you removed the draw part of this card, you would still run it in a lot of decks.
Yeah.
A 4/4 and also cut out the draw entirely. I think you would still play it in a fair number of decks.
Yeah, I think it would still be good. I think there are, by the way, if you're 1939 and watching this, fine, power creep happens, and it's going to be explosive and interesting. When you inevitably get round to the balance patch on this, because you're gonna, there are lots of different directions you can go with this card. Please don't just nerf it into unplayable ignominy, because actually, notwithstanding everything else, giving Britain a ally punishing, super strong finisher when you want to push bond is actually good design. However, giving Britain this good a finisher might be a touch questionable.
I don't think you have to worry about them nerfing this into oblivion, because I would play this at 6 cost. If they doubled the cost of this card, I would still play it in air, and I'd probably play it in control. And I would certainly play it in any bond deck.
Bond deck, yeah, I was going to say, no, I'm with you 100%. If you just wanted to limit this to the point whereby it only sees play in the decks that you kind of would expect to see it in, you could put it to 5 or 6 quite comfortably, and it would still see play in basically all of them all the time. As it is at the minute, the problem is it's just going to see play in every British deck ever, even if it doesn't run any other Bond cards, and even if it doesn't care about air, because why the hell wouldn't you? But anyway, Core, you were going to add something.
I would still play this at 5. I would be dubious at 6, but 5 is definitely still playable, because at that point you're just playing a Yagged Bomber with Blitz.
Yeah. Let's safe to say as we move on, because I'm not gonna let us, because this one we could go for a very long time on. Safe to say, Britain did not get the shaft in this expansion. There are some very strong cards, even if Britain doesn't end up with a tier 1 deck. And I'm not guaranteeing it doesn't. It's seen some very good cards. Right, to a nation which perhaps we're still figuring out. This is a US card. This is a US standard card. This is a new... Before, yes, it has the Navy type. This is the new standard USS The Sullivans. It is a 2-credit order, just like all the Navy cards are. This one says, target unit and the top unit of your deck get +1/+1. Draw a card. Okay. It's some card draw. It's a thing. Let's start with JKing.
I think if this... So this is a Navy card.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the only reason it's going to see play. If this card was not a Navy card, I don't see the world where you put this into a mid-range deck, because you require a unit on the board to play it. You can't just play it to draw a card, like if the board's empty and you top deck this. And like 2 credits +2/+2 draw a card is a good effect, but that's not how that works. Because you need to draw and then play the other unit, and you don't know what that is. And it might be a unit that doesn't need the +1/+1, and you don't get to attack with the 2/2 of stats you are gaining immediately. You don't get it on board immediately. Yeah, this is a pack filler card that's not particularly good, but it has Navy on it, so it's a pack filler card for Navy, which is a pack filler archetype.
Wow, that saves
Sorry,
me an
Core.
awful... No, it's okay. I do want to say thank you to JKing, because I'm just gonna save us some time in a minute, because basically just everything he just said in an English accent gets you where I currently land. But we'll let Core go, because I know Core is somewhat more of a Navy believer.
Yeah, it's nice that 1939 printed a card exactly for me and no one else. So yeah, Sullivans is only playable in exactly US Navy mid-range. It's essentially a slightly better version of For Freedom in exactly that deck. Because ideally, the curve you're looking for is turn 2, 20-second Marines, turn 3, USS Sullivans flips the Marines, you draw a card, the Marines Veterans, it goes to a 4/5 because it gets the buff from the Sullivans, and you draw the top card. Oh, sorry, you draw 2 cards. You draw one from the Veteran trigger and one from the Sullivans. So you get 2 cards, you get +1/+1 on the guy, so you have a 4/5, you can move it to the front line on turn 3 after you play the Sullivans. So basically, the ideal line of play for that Navy mid-range deck now is you play 20-second Marines on 2, turn 3, push it forward. Sullivans, you have a 4/5, and you draw 2. So this becomes the single best activator for 22nd Marines. I don't know if we're at the point where we can comfortably cut Semperfi. I still really don't like having to run Semperfi. I wish they would give us just one more Navy payoff unit. Then I think the deck may actually have a chance of being like a deck, like a real deck. As it stands, it's very, very close. The US Italy version I have been playing a lot of is actually very, very solid, partially because Aurum Roma is such a good card, and because you can generate 3 extra copies with airstrips. So yeah, I again not going to see top tier 1 level play, but certainly a card I'm going to be testing a ton of in US Navy midrange. So yeah, this is very much a card for me and no one else.
Now, just before we move on, because we will, I will say at some point you and I are going to do some sort of collab thing where you try and convince me, because I kind of want Navy mid-range to be a thing. I'm just so not sold. Anyway, I think I'm going to save people's ears. Another US card. It's time for a US special. This is the Big Three. This is a 4-cost US order, and it says each friendly unit gets +1/+1 for each friendly unit not of the same nation. Right, couple of quick things. One, I'm saving myself till the end, because I have seen pretty much this exact card many, many times in different formats in different ways, and have thoughts. But also, that I know there are arts people out there who will make a comment, and you're valid in saying the immediate things that comes to your head when you say the Big Three are 3 specific people. However, it also referred to the 3 nations. The art is valid in both directions, and there are reasons for the choice. But anyway, and also, before anyone gets confused about the Soviet thing, that's a Soviet naval flag. That is a British naval flag. It's just that America couldn't be asked to develop its own naval flag, so it just stuck the stars and stripes on everything. All right, anti-colonialist rant over. Core, go.
It's in theory like decent, I guess. It's this is basically going to do what the Alliance did for the most part, but it's going to affect the entire board pretty much every time. You're in most cases you're going to have units of both of your main and ally nation in play, so it's essentially just a +2/+2 for 4. I just don't know if that's even good enough in the current state of the game, given how fast a lot of the aggro decks is. Like, Shuffle is doing far more broken things on turn 2 with Motorise, even after the nerf. So I don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. Like, maybe it's really good if you're also playing a bunch of random exiles in your deck and it gives +3/+3, but it's a lot of hoop jumping for a board buff that also requires you to have a board.
JKing.
I think if this said 4 credits give all of your units +2/+2, it would be a card that you would play in some decks that are not the best decks in the game, but are playable. That is very far from what this card says, though. This card is substantially worse than that.
Yeah.
Because for this to give all of your units +2/+2, it requires 4 units on the board. And they have to be of 2 different nations. And that is a lot of setup for not a lot of payoff. And there's a lot of times where you will have, say, like you're playing this in Heinz, which was the deck that played the Alliance the most, with German US Heinz. And you'd like play all your smokescreen tanks, and then you'd play the Alliance, and then you'd hit face with them on the next turn. If you're in a situation where you have like 3 German tanks on the board and 1 US guy, the 1 US guy will get +3/+3, and the German tanks will all get +1/+1, and that's not a card you would want to play. Now, if you draw this in a situation where you have like 5 German tanks on the board and no US units on the board whatsoever, it is 4 credits do literally nothing. And that's certainly not a
Oh.
card you would want to play.
Ah, wait, I think Core has just parsed the
Yes.
text differently and realised what I think perhaps he had missed about how truly terrible this card is.
Yes. Never mind. This card is hot ass.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was just give +1/+1 for each unit of a different nation you had. No, never mind. This card is absolutely unplayable garbage. Holy.
Yeah, this card is real bad. The only thing I have to say about this card is I did a video with the help of Bubbles a while ago that I never got around to editing, so I never uploaded it. But we basically got a board state where I had a nation, a unit of all 9 nations on the board in all 9 of my board spots. And now I just need to find a way to also play the big 3 in that situation to give all of my units +8/+8. Yeah, no, this card is stupid.
All right, I'm stealing that one because JKing. So I've just had a realization. JKing has just segued me into something I didn't expect. I expected to have quite a lot to say. I've realized I don't. I can summarize this in one sentence, segued by the comments you just heard. Long walk, shit destination. Moving on. Right, we have arrived at another British card. This is Layforce. This is a British standard infantry. It is a British 1-drop infantry. It is a 1-drop, so it's a 1 cost, 1 op cost, 2/2 infantry with blitz and bond. And it says your non-British cards cost +1, gets +1/+1 when the enemy targets or attacks it. Right. Apparently, I need to clarify this. I'm not quite sure why, but apparently I do. There's been some commentary about this text being unclear as to what it's buffing. I'm not quite sure how, but for clarity, because I've been asked, it buffs itself. The full stop, the period, if you want to be American about it, at the end of the first sentence is critical here. The second part is just gets +1/+1 when the enemy targets or attacks it being the unit. So, Layforce, when you put it on the board and get it into the front line, if someone tries to trade into it before resolution, Layforce will go to 3/3. Right. I think that's clear about how it works. And if I need to explain the +1 cost for non-British cards, I quit. Anyway, JKing, what do we think about Layforce?
I think if you're playing the Bond deck, you obviously play this card in it because it's a thing to play out on turn 1 to disable your bond for all of your cards moving forward. It's a British infantry to trigger the blitz on the Valentine because you're probably playing the Valentine because you're playing the other guy, the King's African Rifles. So all in all, you're playing it in the Bond deck. I don't think you play it in any deck outside of the Bond deck. And within the Bond deck, I don't think it's particularly good. Like, it's a 1-drop, which is what you want because you're playing an aggro-ish deck, and you're trying to stick British units, so that's fine. It's the non-British cards costing additional on this is more problematic than on the Mustang because the Mustang is a must-kill card, and also you draw cards when they kill it. This is not a must-kill card. This is very far from a must-kill card, and you're like kind of unless you played like a completely mono Brit deck, which is, I don't think is how you would build this deck. This does get potentially problematic because you might like play this in your support line on turn 1, but then you play a 2-drop on turn 2, and then on turn 3 you like play another 2-drop and push up the 2-drop because it's bigger than Layforce, and like Layforce is going to stick around and suddenly start to really throw off your curve. The other issue is, like, if you get it to the front line, it absolutely dumpsters something like Jagra, where they can't hit into it with a cavalry regiment because it becomes a 3/3, and then the cavalry regiment hits it and it survives. The problem is cavalry regiment has 0 op, so it doesn't matter if you go first or second. You are not getting the front line first against Jagro, and Layforce is absolutely terrible if you don't have the front line and you're having to trade into the front line, because then you don't get the additional thing, and then you're just paying the bond cost, and you're playing the 1 credit 2/2 1-op blitz with downside, which isn't great. I think you do play it, and because the fact that you do play it, if this deck is popular, it's going to be rough to play frontline, because you do get the frontline going first against frontline. And if you get this into the frontline on turn 2 against frontline, US frontline, you're probably just going to win the game. So yeah, that's sort of my all-around thoughts on Layforce.
That's fair. Cool. What do you make of Layforce?
Yeah, I think this card is actively bad. Yeah, like JKing said, you only run this in exactly the bond deck, and only if you're playing the like hardcore every British bond card is in my deck bond deck. I don't think you play this like, and even then, I don't think you're even happy about having to play it, but you're playing it just for the density of the bond keyword. Like if you're playing like a more tempo or mid-range version, this does not make the cut. This is nowhere near making the cut. This is probably one of the worst one drops you could possibly play, but you play it because it's a one drop, like JKing said. Like this into Comb, for example, is atrocious. Your opponent plays Comb, pushes to the front line. You play Layforce, your opponent can just ignore the Layforce, and you're forced to waste a credit taking a trade just to free up your non-British cards. Like, Comb's existence completely invalidates Layforce as a card. So
counterpoint,
yeah.
You go first, they don't draw Colm until turn 2.
Then it beats the Comb. But that's magical Christmas land, because they always have Comb on turn 1.
then they do Colm Rush. And take
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this card is just garbage. But again, if you're reliant on maximum density of the bond keyword, you're playing it.
Right. So the Brit has to have an opinion, I suppose. Okay. So first of all, challenge accepted. If only because I determined this some time ago. It is my intent to attempt to hit Field Marshal with a completely mono Brit deck in this expansion, just because I think it's hypothetically possible, and I'm a masochist, apparently. However, it leads me to this card. This card kind of makes me sad, but not in an angry way. This card has identity crisis problems. So I forgot a clarification that I was asked about earlier. Yes, it's a commando. It would have to be if you understand what Layforce even was. So yes, it has the commando type. Not that that's relevant, but it does. I kind of wish this card could decide what it wanted to be. There is a version of this card that you print that has guard instead of blitz, that does something that lets you soak up pressure to then try and counterpoint with some of the better countering tools that we have seen. And who knows, maybe some other stuff that's coming out. There is a version of this card that you print with blitz that is just better or adjusted somehow so that, if nothing else, find a way to give it 0 op cost if you actually want it to be part of a potentially aggro deck. Because as it is right now, it's trying to do too many things to do any of them well. Like, the best thing I can think of, like literally the best thing I can think of to do with this card, and it makes me sad, is to run a mostly mono Brit deck that has France ally solely and entirely for chasing shadows, in the hope that you can chase this past its biggest existential crisis problem on turn 1 and actually get the bugger into the front line, which is as printed where it needs to be. For the love of God, would it have been difficult to make this card a bit more balanced to have 0 op as a blitz unit, or just accept Layforce's history as incredibly tenacious defenders? Anyway, rant over. It's probably going to see play in any attempt to make a Brit Bond deck work because it's a 1-drop. Although, I don't know whether it's going to see all that much play because hell, Welsh Guards.
I would argue that I would argue that even like outside of a dedicated deck, buffs is a much better one drop than this.
Yeah, there's that too, because buffs has then got the effect that gets a trigger that you can actually control that doesn't require your opponent to attack it when you don't have to. Anyway, I'm going to move on just because it's making me sad. And I'm going to move on to another British card, which will hopefully make me less sad. So we have arrived at Forward Observers. This is a British special card. It is a 4-cost order, and it says, deal 2 damage to all enemy units. If you deployed a British infantry last turn, draw a card. Right, I'm going first, because my channel, my show, my privilege. Good or not, I love this card because it's giving Britain some AoE in a way that's interesting and that it desperately needs, and it has a very cool piece of art. And it beautifully, thematically represents exactly what Forward Observers were used for in the war. I really, really like the theme of this card, possibly more than I like the card and its mechanics. But I don't dislike the card and its mechanics. If we are going to see any attempt at whether it even be a control-leaning mid-range Brit deck, it is going to need some help with mass effects and being able to get to the front line, because apparently we're still going to make it ludicrously slow. Unless it jumps through hoops to get Blitz first. Or it can have Blitz, but it has to have an op cost, so the Blitz doesn't matter. I'm doing it again, sorry, but it's a thing. This at least is not half bad damage, and I personally thematically like the if you deployed a British infantry thing. It fits the way that the card is meant to work theme-wise. I'm slightly less sold on the cost, but I don't know. Who wants to go next?
I'll go, I guess. Forward Observers, 4 credit, deal 2 damage to all enemy units is shockingly a card that hasn't really existed in cards. We've had a lot of things that are like around 4 credits, deal 2 damage to enemy units, but like most of them have been like AoE effects. I'd say like the closest thing we got was the rework to the blockade. 5 credits, deal 2 damage, sometimes 3 if you have the Navy card. So 4 credits, just deal 2 damage to all enemy units. It's just a fine card that is worth 4 credits, and I don't know how consistently you would play it if it was just that, but you would certainly consider playing it. It's not a bad card. It's an on-rate AoE removal. And the fact that you sometimes draw a card is pretty good, actually. I think that you probably play this in most control decks. You're not going to consistently be drawing, especially if you play it on curve. And that's a real shame. That makes me really sad they didn't bring back Baluch Regiment to be just a 3-drop infantry to play out in a control deck that curves into drawing off Forward Observers. But also, if you're a control deck into aggro, I don't think you care that much about getting the draw off this. And if you're a control deck into control, you can probably wait until you're guaranteed to get the draw after like a C4th or a Blackwatch or the Grenadier Guard or whatever else you're playing. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's just an all-around solid card that is on the table of playable cards in either this like Bond mid-range deck or control.
Cool.
I think this is a great card. Like the fact it's when you look, like compare this to, like Bomber Mafia. If this is like active, so say Bomber Mafia is active, you get to develop the random bomber. This is active, you get to draw a card. This is on average going to be better because you're drawing a card that you purposefully put in your deck that you actively will want. So I think this is probably just better than Bomber Mafia was, like period point blank. I agree this is probably going to be slotted into control, but I do think this is likely going to be pretty good in the Bond mid-range deck, because the Bond mid-range deck, your curve, your ideal curve is like turn 1 Welsh Guards or whatever, turn 2 Land Girls, draw 2, turn 3 Kings Africa Rifles, turn 4 Observer Corps, wipe your opponent's aggro board, draw a card, turn 5 Mustang, dome your opponent for 8. Like, that's kind of the curve I'm envisioning so far for that deck. So I think it's good. The biggest obstacle for forward observers is the existence of crossfire.
I knew we
If
were
you're
going to
playing-
get there.
Yes, someone fetch me my drum. I've got some banging to do. Like, again, like, you print this at on rate at 4, solid card. But are you going to play this over crossfire? If you're playing a control deck, are you going to like say, no, I don't want to play the best nation in the game as an ally? No, I'm going to play something worse, like US. No, you're going to pick Germany and you're going to play crossfire because crossfire is absolutely absurd. So I think that's like the biggest roadblock for this card is, are you going to forego playing Germany as an ally? Are you going to not run crossfire? Are you going to ignore the existence of the single best piece of AoE the game has ever seen? And I just don't know if you will. So yeah, again, I think it's a great card. I really don't know if it's going to actually find a home with the other options that exist at the same cost.
It's fair. If it makes you feel better, I'm going to play the crap out of it just because I like it. But I have long since retired my anything approaching competitive attempts, so I can. Yeah, it's all fair points, but I will say this is a tool that I think if we wanted to push the British kind of, hey, we want to be Britain all on our own mid-range idea, is a great way to do it. It's a tool it would need if it was ever going to exist. I suspect the only way it's going to exist is... I think this is going to just be a deck for me and me alone. But I have ideas. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I think it's interesting. I do think it is nice to see a 4-credit piece of AoE that doesn't make Core cry. Right, moving on to another US card. We have arrived at Victory Garden. It's vegetable time, folks. This is a new US 3-cost elite order. So here we go. JKing can't see Core. I wish he could. Victory Garden, as I say, is a 3-cost elite order that says each US unit in your deck gets destruction. Give the top unit in your deck +1/+1. There's no way I can't start with Core with a face like that. You don't look so happy, my friend.
I don't think I have ever seen a card this bad printed in any game. Like, I think this is one of the single worst elites I have seen. I think this is worse than the Grenadier brothers from Germany that got rotated. I think this is one of the biggest pieces of absolute unredeemable garbage. The fact that this wants you to play it early to get the maximum value out of it, which means you're passing turn 3 to give every unit in your deck a destruction effect. So you have to pass turn 3, then draw a unit with the destruction effect, then play the unit with the destruction effect. The unit then needs to die, triggering the destruction effect, giving the top card +1/+1, and then you need to draw the buffed card. This is like 7 steps to get the payoff for this card. This is so unbelievably dog water. I cannot believe this is what US got this expansion. After losing 3 playable elites, they get the professionals, which is a piece of design that I absolutely loathe, that I think should never have existed, that is arguably not even all that playable. And then they slap them with an absolutely unplayable piece of shit 3-drop. So yeah, I am very upset with this, that this is what US got.
Right, JKing.
So I'm very excited for this because I watched your guys' first cards review, and there were a few different cards that I was like, oh, I actually have like a very different opinion on this. And so far we've been pretty much on the same page for everything up until now. I think Victory Garden is a very solidly mediocre card. I'm not going to say it's good. I'm not going to say it's going to be played in the best version of US Frontline, but I think it is very far from being the worst elite ever printed. I think it's probably less playable than the professionals, but I don't think by a lot. Also, it's got my favorite card art in the entire game on it. This card is hilarious. It's just a basket of vegetables, and I find that amazing. I just really love that, like, you're getting crazy amounts of value out of a basket of vegetables in a game of tanks and artillery and planes blowing each other up. This card reminds me a lot of island hopping, which was an old elite from Breakthrough that US got, which was give the enemy HQ, when this takes 3 damage, give your unit +2/+2. So it was one of the deal damage to the HQs to trigger cards. Yeah. So basically what it meant was whenever you hit the opponent for 3 damage in a turn, one of your units on the board will get +2/+2, and it can only trigger once per turn. And that card I played the hell out of in Frontline. I was very resistant to move over to Blitzkrieg over Island Hopping. Now, that was for very specific matchups, because Island Hopping allowed any single unit to become a major threat against the type of control deck that just wants to remove every single unit you play, one at a time. So basically, every unit turned into removal check if it had at least 3 attack to get the first proc of Island Hopping. Victory Garden is kind of different in that way, but it's similar in the 3 credit order that meant for a mid-range tempo deck that does absolutely nothing the turn you play it. Now, I see a world where you do Victory Garden on, like, because Victory Garden is a card that's going to be relatively unplayable against aggro unless you literally have nothing else to do. But against control, there's a lot of times where you'd rather just play Victory Garden on turn 3 than, like, play another unit that's going to get killed by Crossfire on turn 4. And if you play Victory Garden on turn 3, and then you're just getting a decent amount of stats out of that. Like, it's nothing flashy. It's nothing amazing. It's not consistent enough that... like, I'm not a huge fan of the type of card that's like, if you draw it on curve, it gives you a ton of value, and if it's in the bottom 10 cards of your deck, it's absolute, just, like, hot garbage. I'm not a fan of that in general, so I'm glad that the power level of this card is lower. However, I'm going to play this card in Frontline. I think it's fun. I don't think it's necessarily good. I think you probably have a better Frontline if you don't play this card in your deck. But I think it's far from the worst card in the game. So that's my hot take disagreement for the video.
Right, I suppose I've got to break the tie, which is surprisingly difficult for me because I just don't care. Core is clearly quite passionate. JKing makes I like the term kind of. The turn of phrase is good. I think it is. God, mediocre is a good word for this card. I will say, bold statement, sir. But I think the 2 old boys are possibly gonna have some words behind the woodshed about worst elite ever. No, not by a distance, in my opinion. But oh god, am I likely to play this in my Frontline deck? Honestly, if there was, I shouldn't say this, but if there was a way to get the aubergine emoji to spam during the game,
that's
you'd
exactly
sell
what I was
me.
thinking.
Like, literally, I'd play this, and every time the buff deployed, I'd be clicking the aubergine emoji. But honestly, that may or may not tell you how seriously we take the card. But I will say one thing. As a newer player advocate, if you draw this elite and you are playing like tempo and value decks and you have a limited collection and you don't have anything else to include, at 1 card in your 39, this is not going to make your deck actively worse. And if it can get some momentum, it absolutely can make your deck actively better. Granted, by a very little bit, but it can make your deck actively better.
So, I think there's two things that come to mind when I think about this card. One is, why does it have to say your US units get this? Like, it's an elite. You at most can have 12 allied nation units in your deck. And the fact that they felt that that was too much value to get out of Victory Guided, that they had to limit it to US units, is very funny to me. But you can play it with the Matsumoto, the Japanese unit that deals 1 damage to the HQ every time a destruction effect triggers.
Yeah.
This is give all your US units a destruction effect. So there is that destruction synergy. And the other thing is the play pattern I see envision with this card that makes it very tempting to run is you play this on turn 3, and then on turn 4 you Sherman, draw 2 cards, and then on turn 5 you play like a couple of 1-drops, get a big board going, and then your opponent clears the board. They crossfire you, or they wave after wave you, or they do whatever. They destroy like 4 or 5 units, and all of those destruction effects trigger at once to give the top unit of your deck +4/+4 or +5/+5. And if you're playing a frontline deck, like a good probably third, maybe half of your deck has Blitz. And most of those are tanks. So, like, if you draw like a 7/7 35T after your opponent clears the board, you're pretty happy with the outcome of Victory Guided, even if the 35T does not itself have a destruction effect. So yeah, that's sort of the way I envision it. Is it gives you like very, very minuscule buffs as you go along, but if your opponent ever fully wipes a board, it gives you one big guy, and having a big guy is something that Frontline typically lacks.
I've just had a thought, and it's journey time. Because that's what we're doing today. Join me, if you will, in an alternate universe of Frontline, where you get through the early game with some bits and pieces, but your opponent's a bit confused because it's not what they're expecting. Then on turn 3, you drop this. Then on turn 4, you play the Choco Boys. Then you play the Choco Boys, like, come out again and again and again, which thins your deck down. Then you get the trigger and the hit off the one Choco Boys when it trades out of it. There are ways that you could try and force a target on this. And, I mean, we did just lose 164th, which was good value. I'm really reaching for... Like, is it going to see play? Probably yes at the lower ranks, because actually there's some value to be had out of this card, in my opinion, despite Core's disparaging remarks. There is value to get out of this card if you can't get it anywhere else. Is it going to see competitive play? Well, I think that depends on one very specific thing. And that is, if the guy directly below me decides that he wants to qualify for one of the tournaments and basically be himself. Because if that is true, this is 100% memeing its way into a US deck that he's playing at a tournament.
Oh, you better believe if I qualify to a single tournament, I am bringing Victory Guided Frontline.
Hear me out. US Germany Frontline, the only order is Victory Garden, Arado turn 1.
Oh, God!
The amount of time... You joke? I have unironically in the past tried to make a US German Frontline with Arado and the only order being Island Hopping. So, the amount of decks I have built with Arado and one elite order is a lot.
It's okay. It's okay, you're not alone. Because it's just that thing in your head that's like, Arado, one elite order, some good units. There's got to be something. Okay, yeah. We're doing it. We're so doing it again.
This card, it's unfortunate because this card has incredible anti-synergy with the most playable US deck from the last expansion, which is Boosters. Because all of your units are orders that summon units, and then the only actual units you're playing are like the same units that are being recycled over and over and over with like put on top of your deck type cards. So Yeah, Victory Garden does like absolutely nothing for the Brewster's deck. But we're getting Red Devils back. We're getting the entire gang back together. Combat Engineers is back, right? Or maybe it's
Yep.
been back for a while. We're getting the whole frontline gang back, and we're gonna go out there and we're gonna grow some eggplants.
Yeah, I mean, I will say 1939, I want my 99th back. Just so I can have the whole gang. But, okay, we're moving on, mostly before JKing convinces me to start running Victory Garden and Frontline, because he's like this far away and it's terrifying. All right, so let's go to Japan, and let's go to another elite card. This is Storm Division. Storm Division is an 8 cost, 0 op cost, 8/8 infantry with blitz and fury, and it says your other Japanese units have +2 attack. Let's start with core.
It's okay. It goes into exactly one deck, and that's Japan midrange. Like the Japan midrange with the package they've been slowly rolling out this expansion, with the 3/4 guard that drains your opponent when it dies, with the key ETAs, the 6/5 or 6/4 fighter that drains your opponent when it dies.
Yeah, the closest we've ever gotten to lifelink in cards.
Yeah, it's just basically just drain, just like basically just lightning helixing your opponent every time a thing dies. I think if this goes exactly in that deck, I think the ETAs and Storm Division are like your top end. This is what you're aiming to close games out with. The rest of the deck is going to be just solid mid range and removal. I mean, it's probably going to be okay. If you look at like Queen Zone, Queen Zone has the upside of removing a thing to get itself into the front line, but this has 0 op, so it's much easier to get it into front line the turn it comes down. So, like, Queen Zone is a fine win condition for the hand lock and for the slower Brit control decks. I played it in the Brit Italy control deck. It was relatively fine. Yeah, I think this is like the definition of mid, but will likely see a little bit of play.
I'm not sure I entirely agree. Not that this card isn't mid. This card is hella mid.
Yeah.
The part that I disagree with is I think it's best suited in Jagro, because in Jagro, like you're probably not running like any cards that cost more than like 4 in a typical Jagro deck. And in a 39 card deck, and especially now that we're not reliant on Enigma anymore, or cards like Enigma or Feigned Retreat that actively don't want any single card stuck in your hand. Now that it's stuff like expansion and recons and Sasebo and all this stuff, that Japan's able to draw very heavily, regardless of if they have a single like dead card in their hand. That allows you, I think, to run 1 or 2 top end cards in a Jagro deck, and previously people have been doing that with stuff like the 5k Panzergrenadiers and like Blitz Doctrine in a lot of Jagro decks, in the German ones. And like that's fine. But I think like another top end option you could have in that type of deck is just Storm Division, because like if you're a Jagro deck by turn 8, if you haven't won already, you're almost all of your units have 0 op, so you might have like 1 or 2 small guys in the front line. You stay on down a Storm Division, you get immediate value out of it, and then you throw up an 8/8 that wins the game immediately on the spot if they can't answer it. And if they can't answer it, it means they might not be answering like your other 2 units on board, which means they get to swing again. And yeah, I'm not saying I think it's good in Jagro. I just think Jagro could probably not affect the win rate that much and just throw in a Storm Division in it. Whereas I think the mid-range deck with all of the destruction, deal damage to the enemy, heal your HQ stuff, their top end would rather be stuff that can hit the HQ immediately, I feel like. They'd rather just like the Blitz planes. Rather than like a big infantry like this. They still might run Storm Division, but I think in that case where you're playing a slower deck, you want to be more specific with the top end, whereas if you're just an aggro deck, basically any expensive card as like a one-of is not going to be that bad because no one's really expecting it, and they're going to be like dumping their removal into like your Kian and whatever else on as early as they can. But yeah, it's pretty mid.
Yeah, so words. Yeah, I think I lean more with JKing on where this is most likely to see play. I think this is actually decent value if you're lucky enough to pop it when you don't have a lot of other elites and you're wanting to play like a Japan aggro deck to climb the ladder and through the ranks, and you just want something to dump out that changes a game state when the game starts to stagnate and you're behind, because it does have, like, it does demand that your opponent do something about it, because if you don't do something about it, it's hitting you in the face for 16 points of damage for free.
Honestly, the more I look at this card, the better I think it actually is. Because how many... There's a lot of decks that won't have a way to deal 8 damage
Yeah, see,
100% of the time.
This is where
like
go ahead. I think we're about to go in literally the same direction as where I was going, because the one thing that is interesting about this is I think you're going to the same place I am, which is there are not a lot of hard removal answers for this card.
There's like the obvious ones like dagger strikes. There's a few other, or just like return it to hand with like a Leopold or a Hipper or a Yag Bomber or whatever. Convert it with capitulation. But like I'm just thinking, because I play a lot of Soviets more than anything else. And Soviets, like, Extended Barrage kills like 90% of stuff, and like Sickle Extended Barrage kills like the other 9% of stuff. There's situations where you're just going to be playing against Japan Control or Jagro or just literally any Japan deck, and you're like, I'm very comfortable. I'm at 16 health. I'm perfectly fine. I have like 6 cards in hand. They have an empty board, and then they just throw up a Storm Division, and you're like, I can Sickle Extended Barrage it and then play a guard, and then they Kyoto the guard and hit you for 16 and you lose. And it's like, okay, you just won off of a single card, and it's a card that's not unplayable from behind, because if you're like really far behind and your opponent has the front line, you just 8 credits, destroy 2 units at the front line. It's not terrible. Yeah, honestly, this is just like a solid card to throw in Japan Control, because it's basically just a removal check, offensively, or kill 2 things defensively, and both of those are fine.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of looking at it for specifically mid-range, because like you have the ETAs for like the reach and the burn damage. This can be played proactively if your ETAs get removed. It can also be defensive with taking 2 trades and then like more than likely sticking around because it's an 8/8. So that's kind of why I was looking at it as a very good mid-range top end piece.
Yeah, this is first direct hit is back on the menu.
Yeah, just a little.
This is just like incredibly power corrupt Jade Division. I kind of don't understand why they didn't just like buff Jade Division.
Jade Division. You could do. Yeah, I am a little bit sad that I don't get to try and drag the guys on a journey, because they're really smart guys and got there themselves. Like, I think it's better than people think it is, except for the people who think it's cracked, insane, and going to end the world, who are going to be sadly disappointed in it. And I think that makes it an interesting card.
I will say this does mean that you can never bring Lightning's Conquest back into Standard, and you might have possibly ruined classic.
I wasn't so much thinking about Standard there, my friend. I think there are going to be some very sad people in Classic.
That's a 2-card combo for 16 damage, and it's not difficult to throw on like a couple of attack buffs onto that. And Japan is very good at decking itself, looking for elites. So, yeah.
At some point, somebody is Lightning Conquest. What is it? Honor. Or Honor Bound, or whatever the hell it is, the destruction at the end of it, this thing together and just doing 17 million points of damage to someone's HQ in Classic. It's just gonna happen, and it will probably be it's probably gonna be Baron von Glower, just saying. But yeah, this is a distinctly okay-ish, with some upside, elite foreign nation that doesn't need a huge amount of help. I'm okay with this card. I think it's fine. And it's kind of fun in its nutsness. Also, I quite like the fact that suppression is not that great against this card, because it's probably in the front line already, so congratulations, you saved yourself 8 damage.
It's also 2 combat keywords. So,
Yes, I suppose we could cook a world, Soviet ally, throw a couple of things onto this that give extra combat keywords. Okay.
No. 8 Storm Division 8 to the front, that's 20.
Yeah, it's true. 8 of that is 20. That's an okay. Someone out there's going to cook that OTK deck. Anyway, moving on. We have arrived at another Germany card. We've all had a lot to say about Germany recently. I think because of where Germany has been. This is 40 Panzergrenadier. Yes, we've got another Panzergrenadier. Who knew? Apparently, we really like them. This is a German special. It is a 4-cost, 1-op cost, 2/3 infantry that has blitz and bond, and it has a deployment effect. And the deployment effect is send a unit to hand, draw a card if it is friendly. So we're back in the world of this German self-bounce thing that I'm still not 100% sure that I completely understand the purpose of. And I'm not going to lie, this card is not hugely helping me. There are ways that you can use this. Clearly, draw a card is a thing. And if there's some benefit to sending the unit to hand, then this would be better. But if there isn't a benefit to sending the unit to hand, you're just costing yourself a pile of credits to redeploy a unit that you already deployed for a deployment effect. And I know I have heard all of the 20 Panzergrenadier lovers out there about this recurring 20 Panzergrenadier deployment. Do you have any idea how expensive that is? Yeah, it's interesting, but I still don't think I understand this. Mostly, I have no notes until I can see the whole of this self-bounce package.
As far as playability for the self-bounce stuff, now obviously this can bounce enemy things, which makes it infinitely better than the other 2-cost one that can only bounce friendly units.
That is very true.
But like, I feel like the people who are hyping up this archetype, it's because they're the only card that has seen play that does this effect currently in the game is Shifting Attack. But Shifting Attack makes the card cost 0. You play it again for free. None of these other cards do that. You have to repay the deployment cost of the unit, which is a lot worse. Now, in the game right now, if you Shifting Attack something, it goes to your hand and it costs 0, and then if you replay it, and then if you return it to your hand a different way, it still costs 0, which is stupid, and it shouldn't work like that, and that's the conversation for another video. But assuming that they don't change that, that is like the only world where I could see running those types of cards. If there's a specific card you want to be able to play like 2 or 3 times in a single turn, in combination with Shifting Attack, but like at that point you're holding on to so many cards, it has to be an OTK, and then comment's gone. So like, what else are you doing with this? 40th Panzergrenadier is a lot better than the other one that we looked at. Again, I have to ask, why does this have bond? It feels like the effect is already not entirely clear if it's good enough without bond, and then it also has bond for some reason. The only world I could see this in is like a German France deck where you're primarily playing this as just like a tempo retreat card to continue pressuring face with your 0-op stuff. But then sometimes you like return a dragons to your hand because there's next to no opportunity cost for that, and then it draws you a card. And you can't replay the dragons on that turn, but it's just like it's a 0-cost card, so you're not wasting credits in the future. You just remove.
Yeah, it's like cyclic card draw.
Currently. And then at least you get a draw that way, like if you need draw. So like that, outside of that, like what are like? I just don't see like are you playing like the 2-cost added production to your hand guy, and then you Panzergren that back to your hand to draw another card, and then it just feels like you're doing so much stuff to do something mediocre when you can just play Germany how it's been played up until now without self-bound stuff, which is incredible.
Yeah, I do think it's. I mean, core of where are you on this?
I think this is absolutely unplayable. Like through the lens of like the self-bound stuff, this does not help you at all. It's too expensive to help you. What the self-bounce package needed was a cheap unit that draws you card when it itself is bounced. It did not need this. And if you're playing this through the lens of just the remove a thing, there is another card that is a 4-cost 1-up 2/3 that removes a thing, and that is Sendai Regiment, and that is much better than this. And I like Sendai Regiment isn't even good enough to see play right now. So like if you're playing the Germany, Japan, or Japan, Germany remove deck, you're not playing Panzergrenadier, you're just playing Sendai. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty straightforward. And like I don't know. I just think this is pretty much unplayable from all angles.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. I will say the one thing that I like the thing that gets me interested in this card, and not in its good way, is Bond. The fact that this has Bond makes me want to believe that there's got to be something, there's got to be some other piece to this whole package. Because otherwise, like JKing pointed out, it's like there is no reason to put a downside on an already mid at best card. Also,
the fact that they slapped Bond on this, but not on Kirkenes is forever gonna baffle me.
I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll find out that there's a reason, but if there is, it would have to be something truly cracked that you can do with this self-bounce thing, because it's just like, I don't get it. It's
the package needs a standard with like deployment affect the board somehow, like deployment summon something, or deployment deal damage to an enemy unit, and then the additional text when returned costs 0.
Yeah. It needs, that's what's, or some other way, it needs some way of being able to, 1, recur a unit that you want to recur, and 2, make sure that you don't have to pay for it. Because otherwise, it's just holding on to a ton of cards to try and play out a big planned turn. But I will say, to the lovers of the 20 Panzergrenadier thing, if you're holding on to all of these cards and building enough credit, I don't want to make your day truly miserable, but your worst problem with this card is every time you recur it, it's drawing you another card, so you're just setting fire to all of the cards that you wanted in the first place.
Yeah, like, hand size becomes a huge issue.
Huge issue with this. Anyway, we got one more card to go, and it is related, so we'll hop across to that. And this is Kettenkrad. This is a German limited order. It is 2 cost, and it says, send a friendly unit to hand. Your German units everywhere get +1 attack. Right, PSA bear mode, because apparently that's what I'm doing today. For clarity, for the million questions, everywhere means everywhere in game. This hits every German unit you control on board, in hand, and in deck. It's that simple. They all get +1 attack when this sends a friendly unit to hand. It really is that simple. But is it actually that simple? And this is where I am fascinated to see what the guys have to make of this. And I'm going to cheat because I'm going to start with Core, because I think JKing and I are both going to go in a breaking this down direction. So Core, what do you think of Kettenkrad?
This card, I've said this about a lot of cards this expansion, but it's true. This card is incredibly interesting. Like, yes, return friendly units to your hand is a massive downside, but the upside of +1 attack to every German unit in your hand, deck, and field that's a lot. That's an awful lot. Rally wishes it was this. When you compare this to the M3 Lee, that US is getting. This is much easier to trigger. It is a much better payoff overall. It doesn't affect just the deck, it affects everything. So where I am struggling is I don't know if this is going to be good enough. The first home I think of immediately off the top of my head is Heinz. That's where I can see myself sliding this in. Heinz is losing Blitz Doctrine. I can potentially see myself running 2 Kettenkrad as a replacement for Blitz Doctrine, because you can bounce like your Panzer 3F to reuse the deployment effect at a later turn while also still triggering like your KFC packs, for example. Like they get the Panzer buff and they get the Kettenkrad buff, and so they're triggering twice. So there are applications and there are decks that maybe want to look at this. The fact that it is so aggressively costed at 2 for such a big effect board wise, it's difficult to look at this and say definitively that it's bad. So I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to this card being absolute dog water, but I'm very interested in testing it out because I think it might be okay.
Okay, so let's move to JKing and see what point of view you might have on this.
This is a very difficult card to evaluate, because if you only read the second half of this card, that is insane card text. That is like Blitz Doctrine level of card text in terms of giving you permanent buff, and it's a limited, and it's a lot cheaper to play. You can get it off a lot earlier in the game, and unlike Blitz Doctrine, it doesn't affect only tanks, and it affects things already on board. So your German units everywhere get +1 attack on a card you can play 3 of in your deck is an incredibly powerful card. The issue is the first part of that, which is send a friendly unit to hand. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The deck that would most want to play this is Heinz, because Heinz typically has the highest concentration of German units. Most of them have Blitz, or if they don't have Blitz, they have ways to be given Blitz. And Heinz's biggest issue is it falls off really hard in terms of unit size very, very quickly. It doesn't really have a way to scale. Blitz Doctrine kind of gave it that, but it was really, really slow to go for. This allows you to make your units bigger, to scale better, for these big swing turns without needing to wait until like turn 4 at the minimum for the Blitz Doctrine. But the issue is Heinz, their biggest issue in terms of like the downsides of the deck is card draw. And this does not help your card draw situation because it's 2 credits, lose additional tempo beyond the 2 credits you're paying for this. And then also that's just a card in your hand that is no longer in your hand. So the question is, I think drawing 3 of these in a Heinz deck is bad. Like, more often than not, if you draw 3 of these, you are not happy with that, and it's going to make you in a lot worse of a situation than if you drew 1. 2, I am unsure about if you want 1 or 2. But the thing is, you probably run 3 in the deck, because if you can play this on turn 2 80% of the time, you're very happy overall. So I think Heinz is a very good choice. I think Germany, France, again, comes to mind for this, where you can just like bounce dragons for like less opportunity cost. Plus, France ally gives you more opportunity for card draw, and the deck is a bit more mid-rangey. So the tempo loss early in the game is less important. The other thing that comes to mind is actually like a certain control decks. If you could build a unit dense control deck, that would be kind of unlike anything we've seen in a while for Germany. But the card that comes to mind is the Grenadier that gives you the production in hand when you play it.
Yeah, Volksgren. That's what I was thinking as well.
Yeah. Because if you can do that, then it's cheap unit to play. It's a unit you're playing in control. It's even giving you, because of its deployment effect, it's giving you even less downside to bouncing it, because it's effectively 1 credit to replay it rather than 2 because of the extra production that you get. And yeah, I think that this is a very powerful card. And what I like about this card is, unlike Blitz Doctrine, it isn't like also generating cards into your hand. Like when you're building a deck with Kettenkrad, you do have to make the decision of, well, how many units do I need in this deck, and how many specifically German units do I need in this deck, and how many cheap units do I need to be able to bounce things, versus how many like units do I want to be played that are a bit more mid-rangey that are getting a use out of this attack. So yeah, there's a very, very fascinating card that I think is certainly going to see play, but what it sees play in, I'm not entirely positive about. It might just see play in everything, outside of burn you down German control, which is the main thing that we're seeing with Germany right now. So it's very fun to have a very powerful card that does not fit into the current build of Germany. I'm very, very happy about this card.
Yeah, my first lead off with this is I really, really, really like the design of this card. I like the design of this card a lot because I think it does an interesting thing in a useful way that has the occasional moment to make you sad if you see too much of it. But yeah, I think I'm personally probably going to cook quite a lot with this card, if only to see what can be done with it, because like hypothetically this could be like an incredibly powerful effect if you can trigger it at the right time and efficiently. But it is that question of it. There are a couple of question marks on it. The fact that it's German units only, which is good design, 1939, before you think this is me suggesting it shouldn't be, is not what I'm saying. It absolutely should be German units only. But that is a thing that makes you think about your deck build a lot more, which everyone knows I'm pro. The fact that it's limited makes you actually have room to think about how much you want to weight the card in your deck, as opposed to Blitz Doctrine as a badly designed special card that you just rammed 2 copies of into the deck, because why the hell wouldn't you? Nerf or otherwise. And yeah, the everywhere thing, obviously there's the other thing. If you bounce the card, if somehow you find a way to bounce card into your hand and then everything gets +1, of course that includes the card that you just bounced to your hand, then you replay it and then you somehow bounce it again, it would then buff there's a whole rolling thing that you can do with this. There are lots of interesting interactions that could give not control burn you to death German decks a way to win the game, and I'm all for that, because can we just see anything else from Germany?
Just a note as well on the targets for this. I mean, if you're playing Heinz, you're already potentially running a Rado, which is a really good target to bounce with Kettenkrad, because it offsets the negative card advantage of it. You could also potentially bounce the Jaeger Regiment, the 1/2 Jaeger Regiment, after you've already drawn the card from the deploy. So it's a way of like reusing that as a little piece of card advantage while also buffing your units. And we do play the Jaeger Regiment in Heinz already, and like it's not a unit you really care if it's on the board or not. You're using it to draw the card off the deployment effect when you take a trade. So there are decent targets in Heinz already, and there's already like some solid value options for bouncing in Germany. Like you mentioned, the Volksgrenadiers help offset the cost by giving you the productions. So yeah, I think this might be I think it might be a real card.
Yeah. The more we talk about it, the more certain I am that this is going to be a very, very powerful card. And it's what I like about it is also it pushes, like obviously we've seen Germany getting buffs to all their stuff before with Blitz Doctrine, but it pushes it in a very different direction, because with Blitz Doctrine, the tanks you develop off the second Blitz Doctrine would get buffed by the first one. The 35T off the Panzergrenadiers would get the buffs from the Blitz Doctrines. I mean, people weren't really running Africa Corps, but there's like other ways to develop or generate units that would get buffed by this, whereas none of those get buffed by Kettenkrad. But Kettenkrad does buff other stuff that is not necessarily seeing a lot of play in Germany. So it's, despite being in some ways similar, it's going to be pushing other cards than in Germany. And another thing that I have to say about this is, like, this has so much anti-synergy with all of the other self-bounce cards we've seen.
Oh,
Like,
Yeah.
you just play this in a completely different deck. I don't understand what any of the other cards are doing.
Yeah, no,
If
100%.
Kettenkrad is like a card that exists.
No, 100%. It's like this has nothing to do with the self bounce archetype really at all. It just does its own thing in its own self-fulfilling, efficient way, which I'm fine with. I suppose, by the way, if anyone is curious, because someone did ask me somewhere, I think in private messages anyway, Kettenkrad, literally the thing in the picture is the card. It's a vehicle. Don't ask. But yeah, it's
Two other things.
Oh, please carry on, because I want to get a clip at some point of all the thinking faces that this card has given us.
Two other things that come to mind. One with Homefront is the Kanazawa Regiment, the 5/5 Japanese unit that when an undestroyed unit leaves the battlefield, deal 2 damage to the enemy HQ and give yours +2 defense. Japan also seems like a relatively natural ally for having cheap units to bounce, because if you want to maximize the value out of this, you want to be bouncing non-German units to buff the German units to the backs. The other thing that comes to mind is oh no, I've completely blanked on what I was going to say. Yeah.
Wow.
I had a second thought. That is now completely gone. We'll see if it comes back.
It may resurface. God, I think this is definitely the card that has kind of collectively... It's interesting this is the last card we're doing, because it's collectively had all of us kind of just... It does make your head, like, churn in a very different... JKing's got his thought back. Go.
Yeah, the thought was it is an even cost card, so you can play it in Jet, and then you bounce, like you play one earlier, and then you do like War Machine, ramp stuff, US ally, and then you play Jet, and then you play the second one on the Jet to get Jet back into your hand. Plus, it's buffing your Jets.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, got some even synergy going on there.
Yeah, there's a whole heap, I think, to unpack with this card, and honestly, a whole heap to unpack with Homefront in general. We are gonna start wrapping up now. I will say this is always a pleasure. Yes, it takes effort to do, but Lord, it's fun to talk about cards like this with people who, like me, share a passion for tearing things apart and having passionate opinions, and sometimes having different passionate opinions. A massive thank you to JKing and to Core for taking the time to come and do this and helping me make this Cards SOE thing that I have a whole bunch of ideas for in the new year start to actually grow into something. Cards SOE in some form is gonna be back with more on the cards as they come out. I just have no idea whether it's gonna be me or 3 of us, 2 of us, some combination, or 5 extra. I have no idea, because at the minute we're just trying to keep up with the release schedule, which is a thing. I will say, because I'm allowed to do it, keep your eyes peeled around my channel and stuff, because we're still in spoiler season and there might be something cool coming. In the meantime, I'm going to let the guys sign off in their own way. So, JKing, as usual, let us know where we can find you.
You can find me primarily on my YouTube channel, JKing7. I am covering the expansion over there, so you can get even additional thoughts if you didn't get enough of how I feel about these cards. I'll be doing videos over there on my channel talking about these cards, even some more. And then once the expansion drops, I will be doing some videos showcasing some new decks and playing around with some things.
And cool.
Yeah, likewise, you can find me on YouTube over at CoreData. I will be doing a lot of brewing when this set comes out, as I mentioned last time. So far, it remains I am much higher on this set than I was on Naval Warfare. I find everything in this set a lot more interesting as a deck builder. So very much looking forward to that. So yeah, if you guys are interested in like fun brews or interesting deck building, head on over to my channel. And yeah, I'll be doing a lot more once the set comes out.
Perfect. So that's it. That is part 2 and another 23 cards in however the hell long this is, 3 hours-ish, I think, by the time I've edited it, which is pretty good going for us. That was rapid by our standards. I thought I was going to be having a much later night. As always, thank you all for watching, for bearing with our ridiculousness. Take care of yourselves, be good humans, and we will catch you all next time.